"Better leave now, before they find you here with me." She grabbed his wrist with what little strength she had left. Her eyes weren't begging, they were warning. The kind of warning that comes from someone who has seen what happens to people who get involved in things they don't understand. Looked at her hand on his wrist. Then he looked at her face, and he said the four words that would change both their lives forever. "I'm not leaving you. If this story moves you the way it moved me, hit subscribe, up your city in the comments, and let's see how far this one act of courage has traveled." Bennett had learned to read engines the way other people read faces, by listening for the thing that was wrong. From the sound of a misfire, whether it was the spark plug or the fuel injector. He could feel in his hands, through a steering wheel, whether a car was pulling left because of the tires or because something deeper had gone wrong in the frame. Uncle Dale used to say that Noah had a gift. "That boy can feel what's broken," Dale would tell people who came into the shop. Like he's got some kind of radar for things that need fixing. Dale never said out loud, though. He thought about it. Plenty was that the same thing that made Noah good at fixing machines also made him dangerous in the real world. Because Noah could not ignore something that was broken. There had been able to, not a car, not a fence, a person. And that, more than anything, was what got him into trouble on the coldest Tuesday in November. Turbo. He had stayed late at the shop again. That was nothing new. Henderson family had brought in their pickup truck, a 2003 Chevy Silverado that had seen better decades, and they needed it running before Thursday because Mr. Henderson had a dialysis appointment 50 miles away and couldn't afford for that truck to fail him. He couldn't afford to pay Noah either, not in full, and Noah had taken what they offered and told them not to worry about the rest. Noah knew. Dale never said anything directly. Noah caught him sometimes, watching from the doorway of the office. There was something in the old man's expression that was hard to name. Pride, maybe, or grief. The kind of look people get when they see something beautiful and already know it's going to cost someone something. Leonard drove home on Route 9 the same way. He always did windows cracked despite the cold because he liked the smell of the November air in the mountains. Radio on low, the kind of tired that settles into your shoulders and your lower back after a long day of honest work. He was thinking about dinner. He was thinking about whether he had anything left in the refrigerator besides eggs and bread. He was thinking about his grandmother, who had called twice that week and left voicemails he hadn't returned yet because every time he heard her voice, he felt guilty for not visiting more. He was not thinking about the sound, not at first. From the trees to his right, a cluster of pines that crowded the shoulder of Route 9, where the road curved near the old cemetery. Most people in Red Hollow called that stretch the dark curve, not because anything had officially happened there, but because the trees grew so thick and close on both sides that even headlights seemed to disappear into them. People drove faster through the dark curve, not slower. I don't like the way it felt. Noah heard the sound, and his foot lifted off the accelerator before his brain had finished processing what he'd actually heard. He wasn't sure at first. The wind had been picking up all evening, and wind through those old pines made sounds that were easy to mistake for other things. He had heard stories his whole life about people hearing things in the dark curve, old stories grandmothers told when they were trying to teach children to stay on the road and not wander into the forest. Up on Take Corners. He rolled to a stop on the shoulder. He sat with the engine idling and the radio still murmuring something he wasn't listening to anymore. He waited, silent again. It wasn't wind. But he knew the difference now. Wind moved in waves and swells, rising and falling with a rhythm that was almost musical, even when it was cold and sharp. The sound was not rhythmic. It was broken. It was the sound of something that was trying very hard to do something and failing at the last moment. Someone was screaming, and they were stopping themselves. They were trying not to be heard and couldn't hold it anymore, and then caught themselves and went silent and then couldn't hold it again. Noah sat in his truck for 11 seconds. He counted them later. He had no reason to count them. At the time, it wasn't a deliberate thing. Afterward, lying in a hospital waiting room chair at 2 in the morning, Himself retracing those 11 seconds over and over again. 11 seconds of sitting in his truck on the shoulder of Route 9, listening to a sound from the dark curved forest that every instinct he had been raised with in Red Hollow told him to drive away from. Because here is the thing people who grew up in Red Hollow understood without ever being explicitly told. That forest, that particular stretch of Route 9 where the dark curve began, and the old cemetery fence ran parallel to the tree line that was not neutral territory. It had never been neutral territory. And in recent years, Hells Angels, Tennessee, chapter having their compound less than 12 miles north on Route 9, that section of road and the forest surrounding it had become something that decent, quiet, careful people simply did not involve themselves in, because anyone had told them not to. Not because there was a sign, but because Red Hollow was a small town, and small towns have an ecosystem of understanding that gets passed down through dinner table conversations and things said in low voices at church, and the way adults in grocery store lines would make small talk that somehow always ended with someone saying, you know, to stay clear of that whole area, don't you? The other person nodding like that was the most natural thing in the world. I knew. He had grown up knowing his grandmother, Bennett, him exactly once, in explicit terms, when he was 14 years old and had made the mistake of asking what the loud motorcycles that passed through town were about. Down her dish towel, she had turned to look at him with the kind of attention that told him this was not going to be a casual answer. And she had said, Noah, there are worlds in this life that you observe from a distance, and you thank God every day that you can. That is one of those worlds. You understand me? He had understood her. He had agreed with her. He had, in the 6 years since that conversation, never done a single thing to suggest he planned on being anything other than a quiet, respectable young man who fixed trucks in his uncle's shop and stayed on his own side of every line that had ever been drawn. And then he heard the sound again. 11 seconds. Out of the truck. He didn't grab anything. He didn't have anything to grab. He kept a flashlight in the glove box. And he took that. He had a pocket knife on his keychain, the cheap kind with a 2-inch blade that he used mostly for cutting zip ties and opening packages at the shop. He didn't even think about the knife. He just walked toward the tree line with the flashlight on, following the sound. Hello? His voice was quiet. He wasn't sure why he was keeping his voice down. It was instinct. Anybody there? Silence. He kept walking. If you're hurt, I can help. I'm not going to do anything. I just want to help. A branch snapped 20 feet to his left. Turned the flashlight in that direction and caught the movement, something shifting behind a fallen oak, pulling itself smaller, trying to disappear. Heard you, Noah said. He kept his voice as even as he could. The way he talked to customers who brought in cars they were embarrassed about, cars that hadn't been maintained properly, cars that smelled like something had died in the vents. A voice for people who were ashamed of needing help. You don't have to be scared. I'm just a mechanic. My name is Noah. I'm not going to hurt you. Nothing. Sir. He moved closer. I'm coming a little closer so I can see if you're okay. All right? He was close enough now that the flashlight beam caught the edge of a boot. Gentleman's boot, leather, dark. And then, as he came around the side of the fallen oak, he moved up and he saw her. She was on her side, propped against the tree, and the first thing Noah registered was the vest. Black leather, lined with patches on it. And even in that moment, even in the cold dark of that forest, Noah Bennett's brain processed the patches with a speed and clarity that surprised him later when he thought about it. The patches that said Hells Angels, the patches that said Tennessee, patch that said property of, and a name he couldn't read from where he was standing. And then he stopped looking at the vest because the second thing he registered was the blood. She had tried to hold herself together. That was the clearest way Noah could describe it afterward. She had physically tried to hold herself together, her arms wrapped around her midsection, her jaw locked, eyes focused on something in the middle distance with the intense concentration of someone who was using every piece of willpower they had just to stay conscious. Claire. Noah went to his knees beside her. Ma'am, I need you to look at me. Her eyes moved to him. Her dark, sharp, despite the pain, and they assessed him in 2 seconds with the completeness that reminded him of the way the experienced mechanics at the dealer in Knoxville had looked at him when he'd applied for a job at 17, measuring him for something, deciding something. Go, she said. Her voice was not what he expected. Even injured, even with whatever was happening inside her that was causing that bleeding, her voice was controlled. Walk back to your truck. Drive away. Forget you saw anything, ma'am. You're hurt. I know what I need. Her eyes didn't waver. I'm telling you that what I need right now is for you to leave. Because if whoever did this to me comes back and finds you here, they're going to need a lot more than a flashlight and good intentions. Noah sat back on his heels. He looked at her. He looked at the blood. He looked at the way she was holding herself, specific tension in her arms, and his mind trained to diagnose what was wrong, trying to assess the severity of a problem before deciding what to do about it, told him clearly and without any ambiguity, she was running out of time. What's your name? He asked. She blinked, whatever she had expected him to say, and that. My name is Noah Bennett. I live in Red Hollow. I'm 20 years old, and I fix trucks for a living. I'm not going to need you to tell me your name so I can talk to you while I figure out how to get you out of here. A long pause. The wind moved through the pines above them. Somewhere deeper in the forest, small, moved through dead leaves. Claire, she said finally. Claire. He nodded. Like that settled something. Okay, Claire, I'm going to need you to work with me here. You need to leave. But her voice was slightly different now. Hard. Still certain. But there was something underneath it that hadn't been there 10 seconds ago. You don't know what you're getting into. You're right, Noah agreed. He already pulled his jacket off and was folding it, moving in that careful, deliberate way he had, the way he moved around a dangerous engine component, present, focused, and nothing wasted. I don't know what I'm getting into. Can you tell me where the bleeding is coming from? One place or more than one? She stared at him. Focus on me. Where is the bleeding? A breath. Short, controlled, left side, and my shoulder. My shoulder took the worst of it. All right. He moved closer. Look, okay? I'm going to keep my hands where you can see them. She said nothing. He took that as permission. What he found was worse than he had hoped and slightly better than he had feared. The other wound was deep enough that he understood immediately why she hadn't been able to pull herself upright, but it had not hit anything vital, or she would have been past conversation by the time he arrived. The injury was harder to assess in the dark with just a flashlight, and he didn't want to move her enough to see clearly. He had done a first aid course 2 years ago, a basic one, required for his uncle's shop insurance, and he was now intensely grateful for every single hour of it. Hey, he said. He stripped his flannel shirt over his head without hesitation and began folding it into a compress. Fair to hurt. Everything hurts, Claire said flatly. Fair enough. He pressed the compress against her shoulder, and her whole body went rigid. Clamped shut. She made a sound short, sharp, before it could become anything, and then went silent again. That, he said, guiding her free hand to the compress. Press down hard. Can you do that? Yes. Good. He stood up, thinking the road was about 200 feet back through the trees. His truck could handle the terrain for the first 50 feet or so before the underbrush got too thick. He wasn't going to be able to get the truck to her. Corners, which meant he was going to have to get her to the truck, which meant he was going to have to move her, which was the part that scared him the most. Well, I need to carry you, he said. He looked at her directly when he said it, because he wanted her to understand that he wasn't asking and he wasn't suggesting, telling her what had to happen next. I know that's going to be bad. Sorry for that in advance. But I need to get you to my truck, and I need to do it before whoever hurt you decides to come back. She looked at him for a long moment. Plenty are just a mechanic, she said. It wasn't a question. But it was something she was working out, something she was processing. There didn't fit any of the categories she was used to sorting people into. Oh, yes, ma'am. And you're just doing this because she stopped. Because you're hurt and you need help. Noah said simply. That's the only reason there is. Another long pause. Then she said quietly, almost to herself, all right. Uh, Mechanic, he carried her. He was not a large man, 5'10", 170 pounds, the lean kind of build that came from physical work rather than a gym. But he was stronger than he looked, and more than strength. He was careful. He moved through those trees with Claire in his arms, like he was carrying something irreplaceable, which was exactly what she was. And every time he felt her body tense with pain, slowed down and talked to her. I've got you. Just keep that pressure on. You're doing great. Don't patronize me. I'm not. You actually are doing great. Most people would have passed out by now. I've had worse. He didn't ask about that. Or later he would think about that sentence a lot. I've had worse. He would think about what kind of life produced a person who could say that and mean it. At that moment in those trees, he was focused entirely on the next step and the next, and getting her to the truck without dropping her or making the bleeding worse. He made it to the truck. He eased her into the passenger seat with the careful, deliberate motion of someone laying down a piece of glass. And she hissed through her teeth and then went still. Her seatbelt, loosely not across the shoulder, just the lap belt, and then ran around to the driver's side and got in. Hey, he asked. What? Which way do I drive? You know this area better than I do right now. Nearest doctor, which person who can help which way? She looked at him. The nearest hospital is 40 minutes. Then I'm going to need you to stay awake for 40 minutes. Pause. There's a man. 15 minutes from here, toward Red Hollow. He was a field medic. He doesn't do official medicine anymore. He knows what he's looking at. Give me directions. If you take me there, she said slowly. I had to be involved in something you cannot walk away from. He had already started the truck. He put it in gear. I made that choice when I walked into those trees, he said. Give me directions, Claire. She gave him directions. What she did not give him, not yet, was the name on that property of Patch. The name of the man who was at that exact moment, 12 miles north on Route 9, standing in the parking lot of the Hells Angels Tennessee compound, coming to understand that his wife had not come home. That name was Ryder Dawson. And when Ryder Dawson started looking for his wife, the whole county would feel it. But that was 12 miles away. And Noah Bennett was driving in the other direction. And for the next 15 minutes, the only thing in the universe that mattered to him was keeping this woman alive. To me, he said, as they pulled onto Route 9, heading south. I need you to stay awake, so talk to me. Tell me something. Anything. A long pause. He thought she might not answer. She said almost quietly enough that he had to strain to hear it over the truck engine. You're gonna get yourself killed doing things like this. Maybe, Noah said. Not tonight. She turned her head to look at him. His eyes on the road. No, she said after a moment. Tonight. The man she had directed him to was named Doc Warren, and he was the kind of man whose past announced itself quietly in the way he moved without wasting motion, the way he opened the door at 11:30 at night without a trace of surprise, in the way his eyes went immediately to Claire, assessed her in under 3 seconds, there to Noah without preamble. Get her inside. Outside that room. His house was a small place on the edge of Red Hollow's south end, set back from the road. Nothing remarkable about it from the outside. Inside, one room had clearly been something else at some point, the kind of something else that required a specific kind of equipment and a specific quality of light and surfaces that could be thoroughly cleaned. Claire didn't ask questions. He brought Claire inside and put her where Doc Warren pointed. Then Doc Warren looked at him and said, You her ride? I found her in the dark curved forest, Noah said. Warren went still for exactly 1 second. Are you telling me what I think you're telling me? I don't know what you think I'm telling you. The older man studied him. Son, that woman is wearing a Hells Angels property patch. Understand what that means? It means her husband is going to be looking for her, Noah said. Doc Warren's expression shifted something between respect and something that looked almost like pity. It means more than that, but we'll talk about that after. He turned back to Claire. We'll look at you. Claire had been watching this exchange with eyes that were sharper than they had any right to be given the blood she had lost. Doc Warren moved to examine her. She said, "The boy stays." Doc Warren raised an eyebrow. "Hey?" "He stays in this room." Her voice left no room for discussion. Doc Warren looked at Noah. Noah looked at Doc Warren. "Fine," Doc Warren said. Noah stayed. He stood against the wall with his arms at his sides and watched a man work with the focused, unhurried competence of someone who had done this kind of thing before, not in a clinical, academic setting, but in conditions that were probably considerably worse than this, probably under considerably more pressure. He watched, and he did the things he was asked to do when Doc Warren said, "Run me that," or "Hold this," or "Press here," and he did not flinch and he did not look away. Claire watched him while Doc Warren worked. Not constantly, she had things to deal with that required her attention, but in the gaps, in the moments when she could afford it, she looked at Noah Bennett standing against that wall about things she hadn't let herself think about in a very long time. There's simple things, plain things, the kind of things that got complicated when you lived the life she had been living for the past 15 years. About what it meant that a 20-year-old stranger had walked into those trees. About what it meant that he had stayed. "Lucky," Doc Warren said finally. He straightened and turned to wash his hands. "Here's bad, but it'll heal." The side wound missed anything critical by about an inch. "A cracked rib, you're going to be sore for weeks." He dried his hands and looked at her. "You need to tell me who did this." "No," she said. "There." Final. Doc Warren looked at Noah, as if maybe Noah could explain or had more information. Klaus shook his head slightly. He didn't know either, only knew what he had found. The older man sighed. He had the sigh of someone who had argued with immovable people before and understood there was no winning, only choosing when to stop. "All right, you can rest here tonight. Of you if he's staying." He looked at Noah. "Are you staying?" Noah hadn't thought about it. He had no reason to stay now. Technically, she was being cared for. She was going to survive. His part in this was done. Claire. He looked at Claire. She was looking at the ceiling. Her jaw was set. Her hands were still on the table beside her. They were the most telling part, not her face, which was controlled, but her hands, which were pressed flat against the table surface, with a rigidity that told Noah she was holding on to something. The table. Something inside herself. "Yeah," Noah said. "I'm staying." It was just past 1 in the morning when the sound started. Claire was in the chair by the window, not quite asleep, eyes heavy, but mind, moving the way it did when his body was tired and his thoughts refused to settle. He had been thinking about his grandmother. He had been thinking about what she would say if she could see him in this room right now, Warren's house, waiting for a woman in a Hells Angels property patch to stabilize. She probably knew, somewhere, in the way she had always seemed to know things. She was probably making a pot of coffee she didn't need and praying in the way she prayed, not formally, but with words exactly, just directing self at whatever she believed was listening and trusting that it was enough. And was motorcycles, multiple engines coming from the north end of Route 9 and even through the walls of Doc Warren's house. Even at 1 in the morning, there was something about the specific weight and quantity of that sound that communicated itself immediately and without ambiguity. More than 2, more than 5, a lot of motorcycles moving in formation, which meant moving with purpose, which meant something or someone had organized them. Which Claire's voice came from the other room. "Doc, I hear it, Noah." He was already standing to the door of the room where Claire was lying and looked in. She had raised herself up on her good arm, and she was looking at him with an expression he couldn't fully read, part warning. "Something else. That's my husband," she said. "And his men." Noah nodded slowly. "How many?" "At least 20. Maybe more by now." He wouldn't. She stopped. Swallowed. "Doesn't go looking without going looking, if you understand what I mean." He understood. "What do you want me to do?" he asked. The question seemed to surprise her. She had expected him to already be making decisions, to be running, or hiding, or demanding to know how this had happened, or blaming her, or performing some kind of panic. She had expected something, and what she got was a 20-year-old mechanic standing in a doorway, asking her what she wanted him to do. "Oh," she said. "Doc's back door, through the yard. Gotta be." "I already told you," Noah said quietly. "Not leaving." She looked at him for a long moment. "Then stand where they can see you," she said finally. "And don't do anything that looks like you're hiding something." Doc Warren was already at the front window. "Sure?" He looked at Noah over his shoulder. "Son, I want to be honest with you right now. Coming here is Ryder Dawson. Are you familiar with that name?" Noah was. Sure. Everyone in Red Hollow was familiar with that name. Hooders. You couldn't grow up in this county without hearing it, absorbing through proximity and repetition. And the way adults lowered their voices when they said certain things, understanding that Ryder Dawson was someone whose world operated by different rules. He was not a criminal in the simple sense. He was not a man the local sheriff had ever been able to touch. He was something more complicated than that, a figure who existed in the space between the law and whatever came before the law, respected by some and feared by most, truly understood by almost no one. "Us," Noah said. "I know who he is. His wife is lying in my back room because someone hurt her very badly tonight." Doc Warren's voice was completely level. "When Ryder Dawson knocks on this door, he is going to be looking for answers. He is going to want to know what happened, where it happened, who was involved. And one of the things he's going to want to know is who you are and why you're here." "I know," Noah said. "You understand that this is not a conversation with any margin for error." "I understand." Doc Warren looked at him for a long time. "How old are you?" 20, Lord. He turned back to the window. "Right. Stay calm. Answer every question directly. Volunteer anything he hasn't asked for. And whatever you do," he paused. "Lie to him. He will know." The motorcycles came to a stop outside. Could feel the vibration of the engines even through the floor, even as they shut down one by one until there was silence again. Somehow the silence was worse than the sound. The silence was the moment right before something happened. I had learned from years of working on engines that the moment before something happened was when you had to be most still, present, most clear. He thought about his grandmother, about her voice. A good person never walks away from someone who needs help. He had not walked away. Now he was going to have to stand in whatever came next. At the door was 3 slow, deliberate knocks. Urgent, not frantic. The knock of someone who knew the door was going to open, of someone who had never needed to knock twice in his life. Doc Warren opened it. Ryder Dawson was not what most people pictured when they pictured the president of a motorcycle club. It was, Noah would understand later, entirely deliberate, enormous. He was not visually terrifying in any simple, obvious way. He was a man in his mid-40s, broad through the chest, a face that had been weathered by years and decisions, eyes the color of old pewter that moved through the room the way a searchlight moves steady, dramatic, missing nothing. He looked at Doc Warren. Sure. He looked at Noah. He looked at the hallway that led to the back room. And the thing that happened in those 3 seconds, the thing that Noah would spend a long time afterward trying to find words for, was that Ryder Dawson managed to ask the only question that mattered without saying a single word. Doc Warren said. "She's stable. She's resting." Something moved across Ryder Dawson's face, there for maybe half a second, and then it was gone, replaced by the same controlled steadiness. But Noah had seen it. Oh. He had been watching closely enough to see it. And what he saw was not relief. Exactly. It was something larger than relief. It was the specific and devastating expression of a person who had prepared themselves in the 30 or 40 minutes of not knowing, to live in a world where the answer was different. There's a person who had already begun grieving without a body. A person who had been driving to what they feared might be the end of something irreplaceable, and had not let anyone around them see it because seeing it would cost something they could not afford to spend. And then Doc Warren said she was alive, and for half a second, Ryder Dawson's face told the truth. He moved past Doc Warren without another word. He moved past Noah the same way, not rudely, not dismissively, the way a man moves through rooms when there is only one room in the world that matters to him. One of his men had come in behind him. They arranged themselves with the practiced ease of people who had done this entered spaces, secured them, settled into positions that were defensive without being conspicuous many times before. None of them looked directly at Noah, but all of them knew exactly where he was. In the back room, there was silence. Then, faintly, Rada, through the wall, Ryder's voice saying something low, or something that wasn't meant to be heard, and Claire's voice responding. The men in the room with Noah and Doc Warren did not speak. Doc Warren made coffee. Noah stood where he was. He had been standing for 11 minutes. He wasn't counting. He would remember 11 minutes anyway when Ryder Dawson came back. Arbesha did. He walked back into the front room and he stopped in the middle of it and he looked at Noah Bennett and he said, "You found her?" "Yes," Noah said, "in the dark curved forest." "Yes." "Alone?" "Yes, sir." Ryder Dawson was quiet for a moment. The men behind him were very still. Doc Warren had stopped moving near the coffee maker. Felt suddenly like a held breath. "She says you carried her out," Ryder said. "Through those trees in the dark. Brought her here." "Yes." "Well, she also says," Ryder paused. His jaw moved slightly, like he was working through something. "She says you knew who she was. What that vest meant before you brought her here." "Yes." "I recognized the patches." The pewter eyes hadn't moved from Noah's face. "Or anyway." "Yes, sir." A long silence. And that had weight. "Why?" Ryder Dawson asked. Bob Bennett said, "The only thing that was true was hurt. She needed help. I was there." Ryder Dawson looked at him. He looked at him for a long time. Long enough that two of the men behind him shifted slightly, understood instinctively, was not a common occurrence. Enough that the silence in the room went from weighted to something else, something that had a different texture, like the air before a storm finally breaks. "How old are you?" Ryder asked. 20. Something moved through the older man's expression. "Family here in Red Hollow?" "My grandmother. And my uncle, he runs the auto shop on Maple." Ryder nodded slowly. They're down at the floor for a moment, then back up. "I need to ask you something, and I want you to think about it before you answer. Look, did you see anything in those woods? Anyone? Any vehicles? Any people? Anything at all before you found her?" Noah thought about it. He genuinely thought, retracing those 15 minutes in the trees, one set of tire tracks coming from the north side of the wood line. Tires, something heavier, ATV or truck. And I heard when I first got out of my truck, before she made any sound, there was an engine, already moving away. It was heading north. Ryder Dawson's expression did not change. Some of the men behind him, the one on the left, to the door, put his hand briefly and quietly to his radio. "Oh?" Ryder asked. "That's all I saw. I wasn't looking for evidence. I was looking for a way to get her out of there." Another long pause. Ryder Dawson did something that nobody in that room had expected. He extended his hand. Noah looked at it for exactly 1 second. Then he shook it. Ryder's grip was firm and complete and brief. Noah in the eye and said, "Thank you." 2 words. Plain direct. Carrying, in the specific way of a man who was not in the habit of saying them lightly. Oh wait, that those 2 words don't usually carry. Then he said, "Go home. Get some sleep. I'm going to have some of my people follow you back to Red Hollow, not to watch you, just to make sure you get there safe. Whatever happened in those woods tonight, it isn't finished. And until I know who it was and why, I don't want anyone connected to this night on the road alone." Noah opened his mouth about it, closed it. He went back to the doorway of Claire's room. She was looking at the ceiling again. She heard him and turned her head. "I'm going to head home," he said. She looked at him for a moment. Noah. It was the first time she had used his name. "Ours. You shouldn't have done this," she said. "What you did tonight. It was exactly the kind of thing you shouldn't have done." He thought about it. Pause. "But thank you," she said quietly. He nodded. Almost said any time, and then thought better of it. Because that was the kind of thing you said without thinking, and this was not the kind of situation that should be responded to without thinking. Instead, he said, "Take care of yourself, Claire." I walked back through the front room, past Ryder Dawson and his men, and out the front door of Doc Warren's house into the cold November night. Three motorcycles peeled out of the driveway behind him as he got into his truck, followed him all the way home, keeping a respectful distance. And when he pulled into the driveway of his small house on Elm Street, settled there for a moment and then turned around and went back the way they had come. Noah sat in his truck in the driveway. He sat there for a while. That flannel shirt was gone. He'd left in the forest somewhere, red-stained and forgotten. He was in his undershirt in 30-degree weather, and he had not once noticed the cold until this moment. About his grandmother's voice, a good person never walks away from someone who needs help. Well, he had not walked away. He didn't yet know everything that meant. He didn't yet know that the tire tracks he had seen belonged to a man who was already planning the next thing. I didn't know that the engine he had heard moving north had belonged to people who now knew his face, his direction. He didn't know that by helping Claire Dawson survive the night, he had placed himself on a side of something not by choice, not by allegiance, not by any decision he had consciously made, but simply by being the person his grandmother had raised him to be. He didn't know any of that yet. He just sat in his truck in the cold, and he was tired and he was glad she was alive. And that was enough for now. He went inside. He did not sleep for a long time. And somewhere 12 miles north, a compound that most of Red Hollow had only ever driven past and never approached, Dawson sat with his hands flat on a table and looked at the faces of the men around him and thought about a 20-year-old mechanic who had carried his wife out of the dark curved forest in the dark and asked for nothing. About that for a long time. In 15 years of running the Tennessee chapter, he had seen a great many things. He had seen courage and cowardice and everything in between. He had seen men perform extraordinary acts for complicated reasons and simple acts for extraordinary reasons and all the variations in between. He had developed, through long practice, an instinct for what was real and what was performed, for the difference between a man who did something good because it would benefit him and a man who did something good because it was the only thing he knew how to do. But he had looked at Noah Bennett standing in Doc Warren's front room, 20 years old and alone, and with no reason in the world to have done what he had done, and he had known that was real. Whatever was real deserved something. He didn't know yet what, but he would figure it out. Because Ryder Dawson kept his word. Always Noah slept 4 hours. He knew it was 4 hours because he had looked at the clock when he finally lay down 3:17 in the morning, and he looked at it again when his eyes opened without warning at 7:22, the way they did when his body had decided that sleep was finished whether he agreed or not. He lay on his back and stared at the ceiling and listened to the sounds of Red Hollow waking up, barking 2 houses over, a garbage truck on the far end of Elm Street, a particular creak of his house settling in the cold the way it always did in November. It was contracting, pulling itself inward against the weather. About Claire Dawson lying in Doc Warren's back room. About Ryder Dawson's hand extended across the room toward him. About tire tracks heading north through the dark curved forest. Then he got up, made coffee, and drove to work. Because the Henderson truck still needed its alternator finished, Professor Henderson had a dialysis appointment Thursday. The world did not stop turning because Noah Bennett had stumbled into something he didn't fully understand yet. His Uncle Dale was already at the shop when Noah pulled in. A big man, 60s, with hands that had been shaped by decades of mechanical work into something that looked less like hands and more like tools themselves. He was standing beside the Henderson truck with a cup of coffee and the expression of a man who had something to say and was deciding how to say it. I got out of his truck. Dale looked at him. "You look like you slept in a ditch," Dale said. "I'm fine. You look the specific kind of not fine that a man looks when he's done something he's not sure was a mistake yet." Dale took a sip of coffee. "Tell me about it?" Noah almost didn't. He stood there with his keys in his hand and thought about how to answer. The silence went on just a beat too long. Dale set his cup down on the workbench. "I helped someone last night," Noah said. Route 9, dark curve section. Dale was completely still. "She was hurt," Noah continued. "She needed a doctor." "To Doc Warren." Dale said. His voice had changed. Not dramatically, Dale was not a dramatic man, but the word came out with a careful flatness that said he was already ahead of Noah, already processing something. Her name is Claire Dawson. The silence that followed was the loudest silence Noah had ever heard in that shop, and that shop had been the backdrop of his entire life. Dale did not move. He did not speak. He stood with his coffee cup halfway to his lips, and his eyes fixed on Noah with the expression of a man looking at something that has suddenly become much more complicated than he thought. I heard you. His uncle set the coffee cup down. Slowly, like he was being very careful about every physical action he took. And Claire Dawson, injured, in the dark curved forest.
Yes.
And you took her to Doc Warren.
Yes.
And Ryder Dawson. He came. Last night with his men. Noah paused. He shook my hand. Dale stared at him for a long moment. Then he did something Noah had not expected. He sat down on the overturned milk crate he used as a stool when his back was bothering him. He put his face in his hands, and he sat there like that for a long count of Dale. I'm thinking. His voice was muffled. He lifted his face. His eyes were the same eyes they'd always been steady, static, loving, in the way of men who show love through action rather than words. But there was something in them right now that Noah had not seen there before. You understand what you've put yourself into. I helped somebody who needed help. You put yourself into the orbit of Ryder Dawson, Dale said. Whether you meant to or not, whether he shook your hand or not, whether Claire is going to be fine or not. You are now a person who exists in Ryder Dawson's awareness. And that is not a neutral thing. That is never a neutral thing. Noah understood that. He had understood it at some level since the moment he had recognized those patches in the flashlight beam. Understanding something at one level and hearing it said plainly by someone you trusted were different things. And hearing Dale say it made it more real in a way that was uncomfortable and clarifying at the same time. What would you have had me do? Noah asked. Dale looked at him for a long time. Nothing different, he said finally, quietly. I would not have had you do a single thing differently. And I hate that. I really do hate that. He stood up, picked up his coffee, finished the Henderson truck. If anyone comes into this shop today asking questions about you, last night, about anything you come, get me immediately. Me? Yes, sir. And Noah? Yeah? Dale looked at him over the rim of his cup. Your grandmother cannot know. Not yet. Not until we understand what we're dealing with. Noah nodded. He turned toward the Henderson truck. He picked up a wrench. He went to work. The morning passed without incident. 7 o'clock came and went. The Henderson truck was finished by noon, alternator replaced, battery connections cleaned, a slow oil leak he'd noticed and fixed without being asked because it needed doing. Called Mrs. Henderson and told her it was ready. He thanked him 3 times in a row and called him a good boy, which normally made him slightly embarrassed, and today made something tighten in his chest that he didn't examine closely. They're superb. He ate his lunch, a sandwich Dale had brought from the deli up the street, sitting on the back steps of the shop. He was almost through it when his phone rang. The number was unknown. Almost didn't answer. Then he remembered that unknown numbers had a different weight now, potentially, than they had had 48 hours ago. And he answered, "This is Noah, mechanic." The voice was Claire's. Controlled, slightly rough, either from pain or just from being who she was. There, he couldn't tell. You're at the shop. It wasn't a question. I asked how she knew. Yeah, how are you feeling? I've been better. A pause. I've been considerably worse. Doc says I need to stay off my feet for a week. Already arguing with him about that. You should probably listen to him. Probably. A beat. Because Ryder wants to talk to you. Not right now, he's dealing with some things this morning. But this afternoon, if that works. Noah was quiet for a moment. He'll come to you. At the shop, if that's all right. Turn 3. All right, Noah. She hesitated. In the brief pause, he could hear something in the background, low voices. Clinking of something metal. The sounds of a place with a lot of people in it. I'm not going to ask you for anything. I want you to know that. Whatever you might be thinking this is, it isn't that. He just wants to talk to a person who did something decent, and he doesn't get to do that very often. Okay, Noah said. Complicated man, she said. but he's a fair one. Understand the difference? I think so. Good, a pause. 3 o'clock, she hung up. Noah sat with the phone in his hand and finished his sandwich. Old Dale. Dale's response was to pull his cap off, run his hand through what remained of his hair, and then put his cap back on and say, right. All right then. 3 o'clock. Fine, I'll be here. You don't need to. I will be here, Dale repeated. Made it not a discussion. Noah didn't argue. At 2:45, he washed his hands twice and changed his shirt. At 2:55, he heard the motorcycles. Not many this time, 3 engines, maybe 4. They came down Maple Street at a normal speed, a performance in it, and pulled into the small lot in front of the shop with the contained ease of men who were not trying to make an impression. Herr Dawson came in like he'd been in the shop before, which he hadn't as far as Noah knew. But there was no orientation to his movement, looking around to get his bearings. He just came in, registered Dale behind the front desk, registered Noah standing by the Henderson truck, walked toward Noah directly. Bennett, he said. The place was different in daylight, in a space with fluorescent lights and the smell of motor oil. Or exactly, but cleaner somehow, more specific. Dawson, Noah said, Ryder. He extended his hand again and they shook again. And this time it felt less like a gesture and more like a continuation of something that had already begun. Uncle Dale Bennett, Dale said from behind the desk. Well, he had not moved toward them, which was a thing Noah noted and appreciated Dale keeping his distance, letting Noah handle this, but being present. Ryder looked at Dale. Claire, your boy did a good thing last night. He did, Dale said. Extra words. Ryder looked back at Noah. You want to walk and talk, or you want to stand still? Either one works, Noah said. Toward the back of the shop, where the work bays were, I noticed that neither of the 2 men who had come in with Ryder followed them. They stayed near the front, which was either courtesy or strategy or both, decided not to spend much time thinking about which. Ryder looked at the Henderson truck, at the tools laid out in their careful order, at the shop in general, the way a person looks at something when they're learning about someone through the space they occupy. How long have you been doing this? He asked. Since I was about 15. Me. You good at it? Yes, sir, Noah said, without false modesty, because Dale had always told him that false modesty was just vanity wearing a different coat. Ryder almost smiled. Almost. Claire told me some of what happened last night. Her side. I want to hear it from yours. So Noah told him, in order, without editorializing. He told it the way he would have told it to a customer, explaining what was wrong with their engine specifically and honestly and without drama. Because the facts were dramatic enough without adding anything. Ryder listened. He was a man who listened with his whole attention, which was rarer than it should have been, and which Noah recognized and respected. They're finished. Ryder was quiet for a moment. The track's heading north, he said. Head tire, heavy vehicle. Yes, sir. And the engine sound was already moving when you got out of your truck. Already moving away. Heading north on Route 9. Ryder nodded. His jaw set briefly and then released. You did good last night, Noah, and I wanted to say clearly I'm not here to pull you into anything. You're going to owe me a favor, and I'm not going to owe you a favor. What you did last night was a decent human thing, and it deserves a decent human response. This is. Noah looked at him. Okay. But I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear it clearly. Ryder turned to face him fully. The people who hurt Claire last night, they know you were in those woods. They know your truck. They know you brought her out. He let that settle for a moment. They're a witness, which makes you inconvenient. You understand what I'm saying? Noah felt the words land in his chest. Understood. He had understood it somewhere in the back of his mind since the moment he had heard that engine moving away through the trees. Sure, I understand. Good. Ryder held his gaze. I have a couple of my people keep an eye on things in this area. On you, I'm not putting a detail on a man who doesn't want one, and I can see you don't want one. But on the general area, up your street, he paused. Your grandmother lives on Chestnut. All right. The fact that he knew that sent a cold current through Noah's body. He kept his face even. Yes, sir. She's going to be fine, Ryder said. And the way he said it flat, certain, delivered with the weight of a man making a guarantee rather than a reassurance, made Noah believe him. Nobody connected to you is going to be touched. I'm giving you my word on that. Noah looked at him. I. Ryder tilted his head slightly, like the question was unexpected. What do you mean, why? You don't know me, Noah said. I'm nobody. I'm a mechanic in a small town. Why does this matter to you enough to... Because you carried my wife out of those woods, Ryder said. His voice was completely level. When you could have driven past, everyone else in this town would have driven past. You stopped. And then when you knew who she was, when you knew what those patches meant, you still didn't walk away. He looked at Noah with those pewter eyes that missed nothing. That matters to me. That's the thing that matters to me. Silence in the back of the shop, of the air compressor, the distant sound of traffic on Maple. Something else, Ryder said. His voice shifted slightly, not softer. The way a key changes when it moves from one note to the next. I know who did this. I know who they are. Noah waited. They're going to hear about you if they haven't already. And they're going to want to know how much you saw. They're going to want to discourage you from talking to anyone about it. Enforcement, neighbors, anyone. He looked at Noah steadily. If anyone approaches you, anyone, doesn't matter how they're dressed or how they introduce themselves. If anyone you don't know tries to have a conversation about last night, I need to know. You don't have to do anything else. There's that one thing. Can you do that? Noah thought about it. Yes, I'm going to leave you a number. You text that number and somebody answers, or day or night. He reached into his vest and produced a card, plain white, and printed on it just a number written in ink. He handed it to Noah. Noah took it. One more thing, Ryder said. Others. Yeah? Don't apologize for what you did last night. Ryder looked at him with something in his expression that was hard to name precisely, that Noah's gut translated as, I've been watching people for a long time, but most of them disappoint me, and you haven't yet. And I noticed that some people in your position would spend a lot of energy being sorry for it, or getting tangled up in whether it was the right call, whether it was smart, whether it changed things in ways they didn't want changed. I'll do that. He paused. You did what was right. Live inside that, that's all. He extended his hand a third time. Noah shook it. Ryder walked back toward the front of the shop, headed once at Dale without stopping, and went out the door. His men followed. The motorcycles started one by one and moved back onto Maple Street and were gone within 2 minutes. Dale came to the doorway of the work bay and looked at Noah. Dale said, yeah. Noah said, you want to tell me what he said? Noah looked at the plain white card in his hand. He said someone might be coming around. Dale absorbed that. His face did the thing it did when he was thinking through something methodically, through each implication in order. Someone connected to whoever hurt her. Yes. And he said he'd handle it. Dale was quiet. You believe him? Noah thought about Ryder Dawson's eyes, about the way he had said, she's going to be fine. They're bolters, and the specific certainty that lived in those words. About a man who had driven to Doc Warren's house in the middle of the night with 20 motorcycles because his wife hadn't come home, and who had stood in that room and found out she was alive and shown that specific half-second of truth before locking everything back down again. Noah said, I believe him. Dale nodded once. Play then. He went back to the front desk. Noah put the card in his pocket. Back to work, but the card was there. He could feel it through the denim, the way you can feel something small and important in your pocket, even when you're not thinking about it, because you are thinking about it always. Just in the part of your mind that runs underneath everything else, that doesn't get distracted by alternators and spark plugs and the normal hours of a normal day. Afternoon passed. 5 o'clock came, 6. Dale locked up. Drove home. He made eggs and bread for dinner because that was still all he had in the refrigerator. The call chip on the table, and he ate at the kitchen table, and he looked at his phone and thought about calling his grandmother. It rang 3 times, and she picked up. Her voice, warm and familiar, in the specific way of something that has been the constant background music of your entire life, did something to his chest that he was not fully prepared for. Well, baby, I was starting to think you'd gotten too busy for me. I'm never too busy for you. He said it the way he always said it. It was always true. You sound tired. I'm okay. You sound tired and like you don't want to tell me why. There was a pause, and he could hear her breathing, could almost hear her deciding something. He had promised Dale. He held the promise. Long couple of days, that's all. How are you doing? She let him redirect her, which meant she accepted it for now and was filing it away for later. It was her way. She never pushed. She just remembered. I'm fine. My hip is giving me trouble again. But Dr. Allison says that's just winter. He says everything gets worse in winter and better in spring. And if I'm patient, I'll feel better in April. That sounds like solid medical advice. She laughed. A small, dry laugh. The kind that came from a lifetime of finding things genuinely funny, but not making a big display of it. Don't be smart. I'm not being smart. I'm agreeing with you. You're being smart while appearing to agree with me. The difference. Another pause. Come see me this weekend. Don't make excuses. Just come. I'll come. Promise me. I promise. Good. She was quiet for a moment. Sure. You're a good boy, Noah. Whatever you've got yourself into, and I know you've gotten yourself into something, they're denying it. You're a good boy. You always do what's right, even when it costs you something. There was the same way. She said it simply, the way she said his parents, sometimes without flinching away from it. Okay. He sat with that for a moment. Yeah, he said. No, it will. They talked for another 20 minutes about nothing significant, her hip, a neighbor's dog that had been barking, a recipe she was trying, a cold snap, normal things, unchanged things. Sure. And when he hung up, he sat at the kitchen table a while longer and held the fact of those 20 minutes in his mind the way you hold something warm when you're cold, almost ready to go to bed when his phone buzzed. Their unknown number. Different from Claire's. The number Claire had called from earlier was still in his recent calls. This was not it, he answered. Silence on the other end. Empty silence, occupied silence, the kind where someone is present and choosing not to speak yet. Hello, Noah said. A voice, male low, with an accent he couldn't place precisely, somewhere south, not Tennessee South. You, the mechanic. The one from Route 9 last night. Noah's hand tightened on the phone, pulsed, jumped once, sharp, and then he focused it back down deliberately. Or is this? Doesn't matter who this is. What matters is that you were somewhere you shouldn't have been, doing something you shouldn't have done, and now you tow things that you shouldn't know. I don't know anything, Noah said. A short sound that might have been a laugh. Everybody says that. At first, I don't know who you are. I don't know what happened out there. Someone hurt, and I got them help. That's all. And then you had a long conversation with Ryder Dawson this afternoon. The voice said, at your uncle's shop on Maple Street. For about 20 minutes, Bay, he left you a card. The cold that moved through Noah's body was not like the cold of the November night. Physical, external, manageable. This was internal. This was the cold of understanding that someone had been watching him through daylight hours without him being aware of it, which meant they were closer than he had understood. It meant everything Ryder had warned him about was already in motion. He kept his voice steady. Then you already know I don't have anything useful to tell anyone. If you were watching, you know I just answered questions. Here's what I know. Nick. The voice was patient, controlled, the patience of someone who believed they had time. I know you were in those woods. I know what you saw. You can connect certain things to certain people in ways that would create problems. Sure. And I know that right now, you're sitting in your kitchen on Elm Street trying to decide what to do. Noah said nothing. Heart was moving steadily, but faster than normal. And he focused on slowing it the way he focused on his hands when he was working around something electrical, careful, deliberate, no wasted motion. What I want, the voice continued, is simple. You stay quiet. You don't talk to law enforcement. You don't talk to anyone connected to the Dawson family. You work, you fix your trucks, you live your quiet little life. What happens to you or anyone you love? That's a very simple deal. And if I don't take that deal, Noah asked, you're a smart kid. You don't need me to answer that. I need you to understand something, Noah said. His voice came out steadier than he had any right to expect it to. I have not spoken to law enforcement. I have no plans to speak to law enforcement. Out there has nothing to do with me, and I don't intend for it to. Me again, or if you send anyone near my family, then I'm going to have to revisit that position. We clear? The silence stretched. You got more backbone than I expected, the voice said finally, not admiringly analytically, like he was reassessing something. Fix trucks, Noah said. It tends to require a certain amount of stubbornness. Another pause. Oh, don't be stupid, mechanic. The call ended. He sat completely still for 3 seconds. Then he picked up the card from his pocket. It had been lying on the kitchen table since he got home, and he texted the number on it. 5 words. Got a call. Unknown number. The response came back in 40 seconds. A text to call, not Ryder. A different voice, professionally neutral. What happened? Noah described the call, all of it. The voice, the accent he couldn't place. The specific things the caller had known, that Ryder had come to the shop, Noah was on Elm Street, that there had been a card. When he finished, the voice on the other end said, you did right calling us immediately. Don't answer any more unknown calls tonight. Shut your doors and windows, not because we think anything will happen tonight. A precaution. Someone will be in your area tonight. You will see them, Noah said. You did well on the call. There's 2, the voice added. You kept them talking without giving them anything. Them on notice. That's useful. The call ended. Paul sat at the kitchen table. He thought about a life where the biggest problem he had ever had was a carburetor that wouldn't cooperate, and whether he'd budgeted enough to cover a slow month in February. About how 24 hours ago he had been driving home thinking about eggs and bread, and whether he had listened to his grandmother's voicemails. Afraid. That surprised him a little. He had expected fear, and what he had, instead, was something more like clarity, the specific mental sharpness that came. He had discovered when the situation was clear and the choices were limited, and there was no longer any point in pretending the stakes were different than they were. He had helped someone. Someone wanted to punish him for that. And the man that someone had tried to kill had told Noah, with the weight of a guarantee, that it was going to be all right. Bennett had no particular reason to trust Ryder Dawson. He had also been looking at that man's face when he learned his wife was alive. And some things you didn't need credentials or reputation to verify. Things you just saw and you knew. He locked the doors, the windows. He went to bed, and at some point in the next hour, they're on Elm Street, quiet and invisible, and keeping their word. Someone settled in to watch. He was asleep before he found out who. In the morning, everything would accelerate, because by morning, people who had made that call would learn something that changed their calculations entirely. Something they had not expected, had not planned for, that accounted for when they decided that a 20-year-old mechanic was an easy problem to manage. They had not expected Ryder Dawson to care. Not like this. Enough to do what he was already deciding, as Noah slept, to do next. And when the Tennessee chapter of the Hells Angels decided that something mattered, when Ryder Dawson looked at his men and said, this is how it's going to be, the map of what was possible changed. Everything changed. Noah didn't know that yet, but he would know it by noon. Noah found out at 7:48 in the morning. He was at the shop earlier than usual. His sleep had not been the restoring kind, and lying in bed past 6 felt worse than getting up. He had made coffee in the shop's small back room, the kind of coffee that was more about having something to do with his hands than about actually wanting coffee. And he was under the Henderson truck doing a final check when he heard Dale's truck pull into the lot. All came in fast, not running. Dale did not run, but moving with the specific compressed urgency of a large man who had decided that moving quickly was necessary and was not going to make a production of it. Shop's closed today, Dale said. Noah slid out from under the truck. I just got a call from Bill Harmon. Bill Harmon owned the hardware store 4 doors down on Maple. He says Dale paused, selecting words. He says there are a significant number of motorcycles parked on Maple Street, ends, and more on Oak and on the Route 9 intersection. And he says the men on those motorcycles are not doing anything threatening or illegal, just present, stationary. And he wanted to know if I knew why. Noah stood up slowly. Hey? He asked. Bill said he stopped counting at 30. The number landed in the room like something physical. Noah felt it in his sternum. 30 motorcycles, both ends of Maple. Route 9 intersection. In Red Hollow, Tennessee, population 4,000, on a Wednesday morning in November. Not a rally, not a passing convoy. Stationary, deliberate, positioned. He's telling someone something, Noah said. I think too, Dale said. Question is who? Noah's phone buzzed. There was one he recognized. Now, the same one that had called him back last night when he'd texted about the unknown caller. He answered immediately. You're at the shop, the voice said. Yes, stay there. Don't go anywhere. Ryder wants to talk to you in person. He'll be at your location in approximately 20 minutes. What you see on the street right now is not directed at you or your uncle or anyone in Red Hollow. Understand? Then who is it directed at? A brief pause. A 20-year-old mechanic in the middle of the night to make threats. People who were watching your shop yesterday afternoon. He wants them to see something this morning. He wants them to understand something about the geography of this situation. He's drawing a line, Noah said. Around me, around you, your uncle, your grandmother's house on Chestnut, every person in Red Hollow that had the misfortune of being connected to Tuesday night. The voice was professionally neutral. Not cold. Informational. 20 minutes. Ended. Dale was watching him. 20 minutes, Noah said. And apparently we're under some kind of rider is making a point to someone. Using the street, Dale absorbed this. He went to the window that looked out on Maple and stood there looking for a moment without saying anything. Car came and stood beside him. 30 motorcycles was a conservative estimate. From the shop window, they could see maybe 20 on this section of Maple alone. Men sitting on their bikes or standing beside them, coffee cups, some talking to each other in low voices. Of them doing anything that any law enforcement officer could have found fault with. Just there. Just making the specific point that Friends itself makes when it is organized and deliberate and very, very visible. Lord in heaven, Dale said quietly. It was not an expletive. It was actual supplication. There said nothing. 22 minutes later, Ryder Dawson came into the shop. He had 2 men with him this time instead of 4. Was coming to understand was a kind of signal in itself. The number of men Ryder brought told you something about how he was categorizing the meeting. 3 meant formal. 2 meant closer to conversation. And said, without preamble, you got a call last night. Yes. We traced the number. It's a prepaid, but the cell tower it pinged puts the call somewhere in a 6-mile radius of this shop. He let that sit for a second. And calling from far away. I figured, Noah said. Local? Dale asked from behind the desk. Connected to local, Ryder said. He glanced at Dale briefly, not dismissively, but with the assessment of a man factoring a new person into his calculations. Mr. Bennett, I want to be straight with you about what I'm doing on your street this morning. I'd appreciate that, Dale said. People who hurt my wife are sending a message to this boy. Ryder's eyes moved to Noah. Through him, they're also sending a message to me. Nudge is, we will do what we want and nobody can stop us. He paused. I'm sending a message back. I'm letting them see that this town, this street, this shop, these are not unprotected places anymore. Not here to take over Red Hollow. My people are not going to interfere with any business, or any resident, anything. But I need these men to understand what they're looking at when they look at Noah Bennett. I need to understand that the boy they called last night isn't standing alone. Dale was quiet for a moment. Then he said, they're plain, awful voice. And what exactly are they looking at? Looked at him steadily. Someone under the protection of this chapter. Informal, voluntary. Something I decided, not something Noah asked for. He can refuse it, that's his right, and I'll respect it. I want to offer it clearly so you both know what it is. Noah looked at him. What does that mean in practical terms? That what happened in those woods on Tuesday, whoever did it, is now also a problem for me to solve. It means that the phone call you got last night won't happen again because the person who made it is going to understand this morning that it was a mistake. It means that your grandmother's house on Chestnut is not going to be touched. Your uncle's shop is not going to be touched. And you are not going to wake up one morning and discover that someone has decided to make an example of you. He paused. It means I'm asking you to trust me, which is a significant thing to ask of someone who doesn't know me. And what do you need from me? Noah asked. Liberty. Ryder said it immediately. I mean that. You don't owe me a single thing. This is not a transaction. Caleb is alive because you stopped that night. And I'm not the kind of man who lets that go unanswered. This is. The shop was quiet. Outside, Maple Street murmured with the low sound of many engines. Ryder looked at Dale. Dale looked at Noah. The look they exchanged had the compressed language of people who had been communicating across workshop floors and dinner tables for a long time, all the words that weren't spoken but didn't need to be. Noah said. Ryder nodded once. No expansion, performance, just received. Then he said, there's one more thing. And this one's harder. He looked directly at Noah with the specific attention of someone who was about to say something true and knew the truth was complicated. People who hurt Claire. The attack on Tuesday wasn't random. They were sending me a message the same way I'm sending one this morning. They wanted me scared. They wanted me to know they could reach me through her. His jaw set briefly. Claire. Which means this isn't finished. Whatever they were trying to start on Tuesday night, not done starting it. What are they after? Dale asked. Ryder said. Influence. The specific kind of influence that only matters if you can demonstrate that you can take it from someone who already has it. He looked at Noah. Close sits at the intersection of 3 county lines and 2 state routes. It doesn't sound like much. To people in certain businesses, it's a piece of geography worth fighting over. Noah thought about the town he'd grown up in, the hardware store, the deli where Dale got their sandwiches, or the church his grandmother had attended since before his parents were born. About Red Hollow as a chess piece on someone else's board produced something in him that was different from fear, older than fear, something quieter and more durable. What do you need from me? He asked again. Differently this time. Claire heard the difference. I told you. Nothing. If something changes, Noah said carefully. Brothers, if there's something I can actually do something useful, not just staying out of the way I want to know. Ryder studied him. Because it's my town, Noah said simply. And apparently someone is using it as a battleground. I don't think I'm comfortable just watching that happen. The silence that followed was different from previous silences. A texture to it, something being reconsidered, something being revised upward. I'll keep that in mind, Ryder said. He left. The motorcycles on Maple Street stayed for another 2 hours. One by one, started, not all at once, dramatically, but in a gradual thinning that was itself a kind of message. We were here, we stayed, we left when we chose to. By noon, Maple Street looked like Maple Street again. Routers, but it was not the same Maple Street it had been on Monday. It had settled over Red Hollow that morning that the residents could feel without being able to name. Who had watched from windows and storefronts during those 2 hours spoke about it later in the careful, specific language of people describing something they had witnessed but not fully understood. One woman who ran the flower shop across from Dale's told her sister on the phone that it had felt less like a threat and more like, and she struggled for the word, like a declaration. Like something being stated in a language she didn't speak but could feel the weight of anyway. Wasn't wrong. Noah went back to work. He was replacing brake pads on a 2009 Ford F-150 belonging to a retired school teacher named Mrs., who had been bringing her vehicles to Dale's shop for 20 years. And the work was good in the way that work is always good when you are trying to keep your mind from running in directions you can't control. His hands knew what to do. The job was clear. The outcome was measurable. He appreciated all of that. He was almost finished when the shop door opened and someone walked in who was not a customer. Before he saw the face, there was something in the quality of the entry, and the footsteps arranged themselves across the shop floor. The shuffle of someone coming to ask about an estimate. The purposeful, direct line of someone with an appointment. In between, something cautious. He looked up. The woman who had walked into the shop was roughly his age, maybe a year older. She had dark hair pulled back, and she was wearing a jacket that was a size too large in the way that sometimes meant the jacket belonged to someone else. She looked at Noah with the specific expression of someone who had decided to do something difficult and was now in the process of actually doing it and finding that it was as difficult as anticipated. "Are you Noah Bennett?" she asked. "Yes, I need to talk to you." She glanced toward Dale's office window. Dale was on the phone. Oh, but not listening. Alone if that's possible. It's important. He looked at her. "What's your name?" She hesitated. One beat too long for it to be a comfortable pause. "Just Jesse." "Just Jesse?" "For right now, just Jesse." He pulled a shop rag from his back pocket and wiped his hands. He studied her face not aggressively, just with attention. She was nervous, not the nervous of some performing nervousness, the real kind, the kind that showed in small specific ways, of her shoulders, the way her eyes moved toward the door once and then back, or the fingers that were not quite still on the strap of her bag. She was afraid of being seen here. "Come on," he said. Led her to the back of the shop, past the work bays, to the narrow break room with the terrible coffee machine and the folding table where Dale did his paperwork. The door mostly closed and turned to face her. "Hey," he said. "Talk to me." She took a breath. "I'm going to attack Claire Dawson Tuesday night. I know who they work for." The room went very still. "Oh," she said, "because I was supposed to be there." Noah looked at her carefully. "Supposed to be where?" "On Route 9 Tuesday night. I was supposed to be driving." She swallowed. "I was supposed to be the one who dropped them at the access road off a darker curve and waited." She stopped. Her hands came together in front of her, not ringing exactly, but holding. "I was going to do it. I had agreed to do it. And then at the last minute, hadn't." "Who do they work for?" Noah asked. "A man named Gareth Cole. He has interests north of here, across the state line into Kentucky. He's been moving south for 2 years. And Red Hollow is the last significant piece before he has a clear route through the whole eastern corridor." She looked at him steadily. "He decided that the fastest way through Red Hollow was to destabilize Ryder Dawson. Well, Riders, remove the protection this chapter provides to the area. And the fastest way to do that was to make Ryder afraid. By hurting his wife," Noah said, making him think they could reach his wife whenever they wanted. Her voice was level, but it cost her something to keep it that way. It was supposed to be a message, not they weren't supposed to kill her. It was supposed to be bad enough that she'd need serious help. Serious enough that Ryder would know they could do it. The man who went further than the plan. He went further. And Gareth Cole, he was furious. Not for the right reasons. Not because it was wrong. It was messier than he wanted. She looked at the floor for a second and then back up. "He doesn't know I'm here. If he finds out I talk to you to anyone, it won't end well for me." "Then why are you here?" Noah asked. His eyes. "Because you stopped. On Tuesday night. You stopped on that road when nobody else would." "Because you stopped, she lived. And I needed to look at the person who did that." She paused. On what they walked into. Noah was quiet for a moment. He was thinking clearly, despite the fact that everything she had said was adding a level of complexity to this situation that he had not anticipated. He was thinking about Ryder's words that morning. "This isn't finished." He was thinking about the phone call last night, the voice with the accent he couldn't place. He was thinking about the geometry of what she described Red Hollow as a corridor, a piece of geography that someone had decided was worth attacking people over. "Who hurt Claire?" he said. "The one who went further than the plan." "What was his name?" She hesitated. "Jesse." His voice was very calm. "You came here because you needed to tell me what I walked into." "Well, all of it." She looked at him for a long moment. "His name is Trace Wilborn. He's Gareth Cole's enforcer. He was the one on the phone with you last night." The name Trace Wilborn did something specific to the air in the room. It gave the faceless voice from the night before a set of coordinates a name, identity, a person who existed. and who had been watching the shop yesterday afternoon from close range, and who had called Noah in his kitchen to explain why Noah should be afraid. Okay, Noah said. It calmly, and he meant it calmly. Okay. Thank you. You need to tell Ryder Dawson, she said. I told you, he needs the name. She stopped. He's going to find out eventually. He will find out eventually. Gareth Cole isn't subtle, and this isn't over. But if Ryder has the name now, it changes the timeline. Why didn't you go to Ryder directly? Noah asked. Because I was there Tuesday night. Her voice was flat and honest and gave no quarter to herself. At the attack, I wasn't there for that part. I drove the car to the access road. I was part of it, even if I couldn't go through with the last piece. Walk into Ryder Dawson's compound and say, here's what I know, and expect anything other than, she stopped. I came to you because you're not part of that world. Because you're the one neutral thing in this whole situation. I'm not neutral anymore, Noah said. No, she said quietly. I know, but you're still the closest thing there is. He looked at her. He made a decision. Can I tell him you spoke to me? I won't give your name if you don't want me to, but I need to be straight with him. She thought about it. The thinking was visible. She was running calculations, assessing something, arriving at something she had possibly already half arrived at before she walked through the shop door. Yes, she said finally, you can tell him, but don't tell him where to find me. Not yet. I need some time to figure out what I'm going to do. All right. He looked at her. Are you safe? For the moment. A pause. Gareth thinks I'm running an errand for him this morning. Then you should go. She nodded. She moved toward the door and then stopped with her hand on the frame and looked back at him. Oh, what the worst part is? She said, I knew. Tuesday. I knew what the plan was, and I agreed to be part of it because I was afraid of what happened to people who said no to Gareth Cole. And she looked at him with something in her expression that was too complicated to be a single emotion. You didn't even know what you were walking into. You just stopped because someone was screaming, and you ended up being braver than I was. You came here, Noah said. That took something too. She looked at him for a moment. Then she left. He stood in the break room for a full minute after the door closed. Out the card from his pocket, and he called the number. When the voice answered, Noah said, I need to talk to Ryder. In person, as soon as possible. And I need you to tell him it's about a name. The voice said, Trace Wilborn, Noah said, and Gareth Cole. The pause on the other end was the most telling pause. Noah had heard yet longer than the others, bloody to it that communicated something even through digital silence. Where he was speaking to knew those names. Knew them with the kind of familiarity that was not academic. Stay at the shop, the voice said. Don't repeat those names to anyone else. There will be there inside the hour. He was there in 35 minutes. He didn't bring 2 men this time. He brought 6. And he did not look like a man coming for a conversation. A man who had received information that had reorganized everything in his mind. Who was now standing inside the reorganization and deciding what it meant. He came to the back of the shop. He sat down at the folding table, which was the first time he had sat down in any of their meetings. Noah took that as a signal. Sitting meant settling in. In meant what he was about to hear required a chair. Told him everything. He told it the same way he'd told the story of Tuesday night plainly, without editorializing. He told him about Jessie, what she said she'd been asked to do, and what she'd been unable to go through with. Told him about Gareth Cole and Red Hollow as a corridor, and the eastern route. Told him about Trace Wilborn. When he said that name, something happened in Ryder Dawson's face that Noah had not seen there before. The half second of truth he'd seen when Doc Warren said Claire was alive. It was something colder, something that settled in rather than passing through. I don't know who he is, Noah said. I know who he is. Ryder's voice was flat. Trace Wilborn worked for Gareth Cole for 8 years. Started in Kentucky, moved operations south after Cole expanded. Very specific set of things he's known for. He looked at the table for a moment, being very, very good at making sure witnesses don't stay witnesses. Arranged itself in Noah's mind with not the precision of something mechanical clicking into place. Phone call last night, Noah said. Was a warning, Ryder said. Categories, which means you haven't been moved to the next category yet, which means there's still time. He looked up, but not a lot of it. Cole sent Wilborn to make one call, and Wilborn decides the call didn't land hard enough. He escalates, Noah said. He escalates. Ryder leaned forward on the table. I need to know about the woman who came to see you. Find her again? I don't know. She came to me. If she reaches out again, I'll let you know immediately, Noah said. Already told her you'd know I spoke to you. Ryder nodded. Quiet for a moment, working through something. I had learned over these few days to let that working through happen without interrupting it. But Dawson's silences were not voids to be filled. The process. I owe you an apology, Ryder said. I looked at him. For what? When I put people on your street this morning, I did that to send a message to Cole's people. It was the right thing to do for protecting you. It also made you more visible. He met Noah's eyes, made things move faster than they would have otherwise. The tactical decision that had consequences I should have talked to you about first. Noah thought about that, about whether he would have decided differently. He didn't think he would have. I understand why you did it, he said. Understanding why doesn't make it right that you weren't consulted. Ryder's voice was flat and direct. A piece on a board. I don't get to move you around without asking. The words were simple. They landed with a weight that was disproportionate to their simplicity. That was what Ryder Dawson was doing in the break room of a small auto shop on Maple Street in Red Hollow, Tennessee, was looking at a 20-year-old mechanic with grease still under his fingernails and treating him like someone whose opinion about his own life was not just relevant, but required. And Noah, who had spent his whole life being unanimated by people who looked at him and saw a quiet kid from a small town who fixed old trucks and kept to himself, that lands somewhere in his chest with a specificity he hadn't expected. Thank you, Noah said, for saying that. Ryder looked at him. If I'm wrong, I say so. It's not complicated. He straightened. Where we are. I know who did this. I have a name I didn't have 48 hours ago. Organizational structure. I know it's Cole, and I know it's about this corridor. He paused. That means I also know what the next move looks like, and I know how to counter it. He looked at Noah steadily. It also means is that the next 24 to 48 hours are going to be the most significant. Cole is going to find out that Wilborn's call didn't produce the result he wanted. You reported it. You didn't go quiet. He's going to have to decide whether to escalate or pull back. If I can get to him before he decides, you can change what he decides, Noah said. Better make the decision for him, Ryder said. Not ominously. Just plainly. Dale appeared in the doorway. He had clearly been hearing fragments and had decided he needed to be present for this. He looked at Ryder. Is this boy safe in this shop right now, Mr. Herbert? Ryder looked at him directly. I have people on both ends of this block. I have people on Chestnut Street. Your nephew is safer right now in this building than he would be anywhere else in Red Hollow. That is not bravado. That is logistics. Dale looked at him for a long time. Had spent 60-something years reading people in the way that people who work with their hands often develop, kind of reading that comes not from words, but from how someone stands. Their weight distributes whether their eyes match what their mouth is saying. All right, Dale said. He went back to his desk. Ryder stood up. Yeah. The woman who came to see you, Jessie. He said the name without any particular inflection. When she comes back, and she'll come back, people who take the first step don't usually stop there. Tell her she's not in danger from my side. Whatever she was asked to do, whatever she didn't do, that's not my fight with her. That is with Cole and with Wilborn. He paused. She came to you because she needed to give what she knew to someone decent. She deserves to know that the giving didn't cost her anything from us. He left. The afternoon was charged in a way that made the air feel different, thicker. Somehow, with the weight of everything that was in motion. It worked. He always worked. It was the thing he knew how to do, and the thing that kept the moving pieces from becoming overwhelming. Having something in his hands that responded to what he did, that could be fixed or improved through the application of skill and attention. Miss Pruitt's truck was done by 2 o'clock. He called her. She came and picked it up and thanked him warmly and patted his arm and said he was always such a careful young man. On any other day would have made him smile, and today made something inside him ache in a way that had nothing to do with her and everything to do with how much he wanted things to be simple again. He was locking the back bay doors at 5:15 when his phone buzzed. Unknown number. Not the same unknown number as last night. His pulse jumped and then steadied. He answered. "Hey," Jesse said. "I only have a minute. Gareth knows I spoke to someone. I think he knows it was you, specifically, but he knows there's a leak and it's moving faster than I thought. Are you safe?" Noah asked immediately. "Like, for the next 20 minutes maybe. I'm calling because you need to know Wilborn isn't going to call again." Claire told him the call approach was too soft. "He's escalating." "Right, Noah. Whatever they're planning, it's tonight." "Where are you?" Noah asked. "No matter where I am." "Jesse." He kept his voice level but put something behind it, the same thing he had put behind. "I'm not leaving you," when he'd said it in the dark curved forest. The thing his grandmother had put into him, without either of them ever naming it. "I need you to be somewhere safe." "Where can you go?" "I can't. Is there somewhere? Anyone you can go right now who Gareth Cole doesn't know about?" A pause. "Aunt. In Drakesboro. She doesn't. Gareth doesn't know about her." "Go there," Noah said. "Here right now. Don't go back to wherever you've been staying. Go straight to your aunt's. And then text this number." He read out Ryder's contact number from the card. "Noah sent you, and you need to be somewhere safe for 48 hours. Noah, you don't have to. You walked into my uncle's shop today," he said. "You told me the truth when you didn't have to. That means something." He paused. "At your aunt's, text that number." "Okay," a long pause, quietly. "Okay, go now, Jesse." The call ended. Already moving toward the front of the shop, already composing what he needed to say in his mind, already pushing through the door into the evening air of Maple Street, where two of Ryder's men were visible on each side of the street, with the specific quality of stillness that meant they were already alert, already watching, already calibrated for exactly this kind of moment. I need to reach Ryder," Noah said to the closer one. "Sure." "It's tonight." The man looked at him, reached for his radio. "Say that again." "Whatever they're planning, Cole and Wilborn, it's happening tonight." A call. He held the man's gaze. "It's tonight." The man spoke into his radio. "Listen," spoke again. Then he looked at Noah with the expression of someone who has just watched a situation move from pending to active, already on his way. Noah stood on Maple Street in the November dark and understood, but with a clarity that was almost physical, that the next few hours were going to determine everything. Not just for him, not just for Claire or Ryder or the chapter or Gareth Cole's plans for an eastern corridor through the Tennessee mountains. For Red Hollow, for his grandmother's house on Chestnut Street, for every quiet, ordinary, unaware person in this town who had gone home tonight and made dinner and watched television and had no idea that the world they would wake up in tomorrow morning was being decided right now in the dark outside a small auto shop on Maple Street. About what Ryder had said that morning, a neutral thing. It is never a neutral thing. He had stopped on Route 9 on Tuesday night. He had carried a woman through a dark forest. He had answered questions plainly and shaken a hand extended to him and taken a card and texted a number and sat in his kitchen and stood in his shop and been as honest and as clear and as himself as he knew how to be. And now here was the consequence of all of it, not a punishment, a reward, but the simple, irreversible forward motion of a series of choices, each one following the last with the inevitability of something mechanical in motion that had enough momentum now to go to completion on its own. He heard the motorcycles before he saw the headlights. At 30 this time, more. Ryder arrived in 4 minutes on his motorcycle, in a truck, dark, older model. Fast, but not reckless. He came out of it before it had fully stopped, and the two men who had been on Maple Street closed in from both sides simultaneously, three of them converging on Noah with the practiced efficiency of people who had rehearsed this kind of moment without ever actually rehearsing it. "Exactly what she said," Ryder said. "No," preamble. "No greeting," Noah told him. word for word, as close as he could reconstruct it. Oh, the tone of Jesse's voice. Tonight. The specific urgency that had lived underneath the words, even when the words themselves were controlled. Ryder listened with his whole body, the way he always did. Something was different tonight. The stillness he carried in daytime meetings had a different quality now. Ark, with his jaw set and his eyes moving between Noah's face and the street and back. Agitation. It was the opposite of agitating. It was the compression of a man who has taken a very large amount of energy and forced it into a very small and precise space. Or she gave you, Ryder said. Jesse, did she text the contact yet? Noah checked his phone. Contact number, not yet. She will. He said it with certainty. What else did she say? Think. Anything specific about where or how? She said Gareth told Wilborn the phone call approach was too soft. That was the word she used, soft. Noah thought back, retracing. She didn't say where, she didn't say how. Her. Just tonight, Ryder looked at the man on his left, the one who had radioed him. Look passed between them that had the density of a complete conversation compressed into 2 seconds. The man stepped away and raised his radio. Ryder turned back to Noah. I need you to go inside. You and your uncle both. What's happening? I've had people watching Cole's operation since Tuesday. Since before Tuesday. Actually, Cole's been on my radar for 14 months. Tonight changes the posture. He looked at Noah directly. I've been waiting for him to make a move so I could respond to it on ground of my choosing. He just told me through you that the move is tonight, which means I know it's coming before it comes. He paused. Advantage, a significant one, and it exists because you picked up the phone when Jesse called and because you called us immediately. What are you going to do? Noah asked. What I need to do? Ryder held his gaze, Noah, inside. Please. It was the please that did it. Not the command. Noah had been given plenty of those in the last 4 days and had accepted them or not based on his own assessment of the situation. It was the please. Ryder Dawson was not a man who used that word lightly. Appearance in that sentence communicated something that the command alone would not have. He was asking Noah to trust him. Really asking, not as a matter of authority or leverage, but as one person to another. Full acknowledgement with the faulty asking was significant. Right, Noah said. He went inside. Dale was standing at the front window. He had been standing there since the truck pulled up, and he had seen enough through the glass to understand the shape of what was happening even without the words. He looked at Noah when Noah came through the door and said nothing. Some kind of communication. Ryder says, inside, Noah said. I heard. Dale didn't move from the window immediately. Barbados. He stood there another moment, watching the street, and then he turned and walked to his desk and sat down with the deliberate steadiness of a man deciding that panic was not on the agenda and that there was therefore no point in wasting energy on it. Lock the back, he said. Noah locked the back. He came back to the front and stood beside his uncle at the window. The street had changed in the 3 minutes since Ryder's truck had arrived. There were more people visible now, not a crowd, not a flood, but a specific and purposeful distribution of men along Maple Street and at the intersection with Route 9, their position, taking positions that would have looked casual to someone who didn't know what they were looking at and looked like exactly what they were to someone who did. Hey, Dale asked quietly. More than this morning, Noah said, or nodded. He folded his hands on the desk. He looked at them. Your grandmother is going to hear about this, he said. But tomorrow. Red Hollow is a small town. Waiting to hear something. I know. We're going to have to tell her the real version before she gets a bad version from someone else. I know, Noah said again. Looked at him. You're handling this very calmly for a 20-year-old. Noah considered that. I don't know what else to do. Being not calm doesn't change anything. A situation is what it is. Dale was quiet for a moment. It was like that, he said. He said it simply, without ceremony. He didn't talk about Noah's parents, often not because it was forbidden or too painful, but because Dale was a man who expressed love through presence and action rather than speech. Talking about the people they'd lost felt, to him, like it should be done carefully and only when it was the right thing. Father had that same quality. Stillness under pressure. But it used to drive me crazy when we were boys because I was the one falling apart and he was always just still like the situation didn't rattle him the same way it rattled everyone else. Noah looked at his uncle. Third, he didn't have many stories about his father. His grandmother had given him what she could. She had always been careful not to create a mythology that couldn't be lived up to. Dale say something plain and specific about who his father was landed somewhere deep. Noah said, for telling me that. Dale nodded once and folded his hands. He picked up his coffee cup, it empty, set it down. So we wait, he said. We wait. Noah agreed. They waited. The first 40 minutes were the hardest. As anything happened, nothing happened, which was its own particular torture. The street outside continued its quiet choreography. Radios crackled at intervals. Men moved from one position to another with the unhurried efficiency of people following a plan. None of it resolved into anything that Noah could point to and say, that is the thing. That is what tonight means. His phone sat on the workbench beside him, and he checked it every few minutes. And there was nothing from the contact number, nothing from Jesse. And that silence was the loudest part of the waiting. Then, at 7:43 in the evening, two things happened at almost the same moment. A buzz, contact number, a text, not a call. She's safe. Drakesboro. And outside on Maple Street, every man Noah could see through the window went from the contained stillness of waiting to the contained motion of something beginning. It was subtle. A person who didn't know what to look for would not have noticed it. Had spent the last 3 days learning to read the specific language of how Ryder Dawson's men communicated through posture and position, and what he saw was something had changed. Something had happened. Something was coming, or had been confirmed, or had begun. Pressed himself closer to the window. Noah, Dale said sharply. I see it. What he saw next, he would spend a long time afterward trying to describe to people who asked, and he never quite found the right words. What he could say accurately was this. He heard it before he saw it. From the direction of Route 9, there this is. From the north, there was a sound that was larger than the sounds of motorcycles had been that morning. It was a sound that had physical weight that you felt in your chest cavity. Was not the sound of the Hells Angels Tennessee chapter, because Noah had been listening to that sound for 4 days, and he knew its character by now. It was different, heavier, angrier, and it was getting louder. Away from the window, Dale said. He was already moving, already coming around the desk with a speed that his body rarely produced anymore. His hand was on Noah's arm. I'm okay. Noah started. Get away from the window, Dale repeated. And this time it was not a suggestion, and Noah moved. They stood together in the middle of the shop floor, away from the glass, and listened. The sound peaked and then stopped. Not gradually, not in the way engines wind down when they're shut off normally. With the abruptness of a decision. All of them, nearly simultaneously. And then there was a silence that was not empty, it was full, with tension, with the held breath of a situation that had just reached its most compressed point. His phone rang. The contact number, he answered. You're inside? The voice was still professionally neutral, but there was something running under it now. Something with a current in it. Yes, both of us. Stay inside until someone comes to the door. Open it for anyone you don't recognize. Understood? What's happening out there? A brief pause. Cole sent 12 men. Not Wilborn. Cole kept Wilborn back. This tells us that Wilborn is being held in reserve for something else. 12 men are outside the Route 9 intersection right now, and Ryder's people have them contained. Another pause. Contained means they're surrounded. Communication cut. Exit routes that don't go through us. Nobody's throwing a punch yet. Right now it's a conversation. What kind of conversation? The kind where realizes they've made a serious miscalculation about what they'd find when they got here. The voice was almost dry. Oh, sit tight. The call ended. Dale had heard enough. He stood with his arms crossed over his chest and his face doing the careful working through that Noah had seen it do since childhood processing, assessing, arriving at the only posture that made sense to him, which was, this is the situation. I have done what I can do. I wait. 12 men, Dale said. against however many Ryder brought. How many did he bring? Noah thought about the motorcycles he'd heard arriving, about the men distributed along Maple and Route 9 since morning. Then 12, he said. Dale nodded. They waited. 22 minutes. It was the longest, the 22 minutes Noah could remember. He sat on the stool near the workbench, and he thought about Jesse driving to Drakesboro, about Claire in Doc Warren's back room, about Trace Wilborn being held in reserve. Well, Wilborn was somewhere, and that somewhere was unknown. And unknown was the word that his mind kept returning to the way your tongue returns to a sore tooth. He thought of something. He thought of it with the specific and clarity of an answer, arriving after a long calculation, the way the answer to a mechanical problem sometimes just appeared, full and obvious after he'd been turning it over in the back of his mind for hours. It was not with the 12 men at the Route 9 intersection. The was somewhere else. Cole had sent 12 men as what? A test, a probe to see how Ryder would respond, to see what resources he would commit and where he would commit them. Every resource pointed at the Route 9 intersection. Every man on Maple Street was watching the north. He stood up. Dale, where is the one place in Red Hollow that isn't on Maple or Route 9? Dale looked at him. Dale's face changed. Oh no, he said, very quietly. Close. Chestnut Street. Noah already had his phone out. He was already dialing the contact number. Rang once, twice. We need someone on Chestnut Street. Noah said the instant the call connected. Right now. Wilborn isn't at the intersection. He's somewhere else. My grandmother is on, already covered. The voice cut him off cleanly. We have 2 people on Chestnut, have had since 6 o'clock. Your grandmother is not alone and she doesn't know that. A pause. But you're right about Wilborn. We just figured out where he is. Where? Not your grandmother's street. He went to Doc Warren's house. The cold that moved through Noah's body was different from any cold he had felt yet in this sequence of days, different from the dark curved forest, from the phone call in his kitchen, different from the compressed dread of standing in the shop waiting for something to happen. Cold was specific, targeted, because Doc Warren's house was where Claire Dawson was. Claire Dawson, who was recovering from a shoulder wound and a cracked rib, and who had told Doc Warren she wasn't ready to move yet. The Claire, who was as far as Trace Wilborn, was apparently aware still at that address. Claire, who Gareth Cole had tried to use once to send a message to Ryder, and who Wilborn had apparently decided to use again, apparently this time. More finally, as Noah couldn't finish the sentence. Living right now, the voice said. Ryder knows. Dropped. Not ended, dropped. There's like the signal had been cut or overwhelmed, or something had happened on the other end that was larger than a phone call. Noah stood in the middle of his uncle's shop with a dead phone in his hand and understood with absolute certainty that he could not stand in the middle of his uncle's shop anymore. I have to go, he said. Noah. Dale's voice was sharp. Wilborn is at Doc Warren's, where Claire is. He was already moving toward the back. I'm not gonna get in anyone's way. I'm not going to do anything stupid. But I cannot stand here, and you don't have a car that'll... The Henderson truck, Noah said. Henderson truck he had just finished, sitting in the back bay, road ready, alternator, new and battery clean, and everything working the way it was supposed to. He grabbed the key off the hook without stopping. Noah, anything happens to you. Dale started. Stay here, Noah said. The door. I'll be careful. He was through the back door before Dale could say anything else. He drove through back streets, not because he had planned a route, but because his body knew Red Hollow, the way it knew the layout of the shop, automatically and completely, and his body chose the streets that were clear and fast and away from whatever was happening on Route 9. With both hands on the wheel, and his eyes fully open, and his mind running the one clear thought that had pushed him out the door. She survived Tuesday night because he stopped on that road. He was not going to let what happened on Tuesday night be undone on a Thursday because he sat in a shop and waited for someone else to handle it. He knew he wasn't a fighter. He wasn't armed. He had no tactical training and no illusions about what he was and wasn't capable of. But he was moving. And sometimes moving was the only honest response to a situation. Others, even when you didn't know exactly what you'd do when you arrived. Onto Doc Warren's street and everything resolved at once. There were two motorcycles on the street that he didn't recognize, heavier from the Hells Angels bikes he'd been looking at for 4 days. There was a truck he didn't recognize parked at an angle across the driveway. And there were three men too, outside, one at the door, who had the specific body language of people engaged in something they wanted to complete quickly. Coming from the other end of the street, arriving at the same moment, Noah's headlights swept the scene, or motorcycles Noah did recognize. He stopped the Henderson truck. He did not get out. He sat with the engine running and his headlights cutting across the front of Doc Warren's house. Boners, and the men at the door turned to look at the sudden light. In that turning, in that half second of their attention redirecting, motorcycles from the other end reached the driveway, and what happened next happened fast, violently, not in the way movies portrayed these things. Unlike a situation that had a particular momentum in one direction, suddenly had something immovable placed in its path. That momentum had to go somewhere, and the place it went was nowhere, because there was nowhere for it to go. The two men outside raised their hands, not dramatically, just up, the pragmatic gesture of people running a calculation and arriving at the result quickly. Back at the door, turned to look at what was behind him, and found two people from the chapter already on the porch. From the far end of the street, moving fast, came more lights. Behind Noah's truck, coming up the street he had just driven, headlights that he recognized in his rear view as the dark, older model truck that Ryder had arrived in earlier. It was over in under 4 minutes. Noah sat in the Henderson truck and watched it resolve with the strange detached quality of someone watching something happen from just outside it. That was exactly where he was. His phone buzzed. Connection restored. Contact number. "Are you on Doc Warren's street?" the voice said. A question. "Yes, of course you are." A pause that had something in it that might, in a different voice, have been almost a sigh. "Stay in the truck. Is she okay?" "She's fine. Warren's fine. Wilborn's men didn't make it through the door. We had two people inside since this afternoon." A beat. You should know Ryder had Doc Warren's covered. It was covered. But the way you positioned those headlights when you pulled up, the way you lit up the porch at exactly the moment our people were coming up the driveway that gave them half a second that made a difference. "You didn't plan that." "No," Noah said, "but it happened anyway." Another beat. "Stay in the truck." He stayed in the truck. Ryder came to the driver's side window 5 minutes later. He looked at Noah through the glass with an expression that Noah couldn't fully read in the dark. It had too many layers in it, moving too fast to catch each one. He tapped the glass once. Rolled it down. "I told you to stay inside," Ryder said. "No. You drove a customer's truck to an active situation with no weapon, no training, and no backup." "I know," Noah said again. Ryder looked at him for a long moment. "And yet here you are." "Here I am." Another long moment. Ryder Dawson did something that surprised Noah more than almost anything that had happened in the last 4 days. He laughed. It was short, genuine, and tired, the laugh of a man who had been operating at maximum intensity for 72 hours and had just found one moment that was not what he expected, overcome, and the unexpectedness of it was enough to break something open briefly. "To the truck," Ryder said. Noah got out. They stood on the street together. Around them, the situation was being managed, men being directed, radios going, the specific organized aftermath of something that had been contained. Noah looked at it and thought about the 12 men at the Route 9 intersection and the 3 men at Doc Warren's door, and understood that Gareth Cole had sent 15 people to Red Hollow tonight, and every one of them had been accounted for. Noah asked. Ryder's expression shifted. On. He wasn't with his men here. He sent them and stayed clear, which is consistent with everything we know about him. He paused. But we know more about his location now than we did this afternoon. Night bought us information. Is Claire okay? She's fine. Claire was awake when Wilborn's men showed up. Warren says she had already identified something was wrong for our inside. People did. She heard the truck park wrong, she said. said it had the same engine sound as the vehicle from Tuesday. He looked at Noah. "It'll be fine." Noah leaned against the Henderson truck and let out a long breath. It was the first time in several hours that he had done that, simply exhaled fully and completely, the way you do when something that has been held very tight releases. "I need to ask you something," Ryder said. "Yeah. And I need you to answer me honestly." "I've answered you honestly since Tuesday night." "I know." Ryder looked at him. "Okay." The question landed simply and directly, and its simplicity was what made it significant. Not, "Are you safe?" Not, "Are you hurt? Are you okay?" The kind of question that was asking about something larger and more interior. Noah considered it genuinely. He thought about what the last 4 days had added up to. First, and the blood, and the truck, the flashlight, Warren's house, and Ryder's extended hand. The phone call in his kitchen, up in the motorcycles, and Jesse's voice. The Henderson truck, with its new alternator and its clean battery sitting in the back bay, being the thing he reached for when he needed to move. "Well," he said. "I think so." Ryder nodded. "You're going to feel it tomorrow," he said. The way you feel things after the adrenaline's gone. It hits some people hard." "I'll be all right." "I know you will." Ryder looked at the street. "I need you to go home now. Real home. Not the shop your house on Elm. I need you to sleep if you can." He looked back at Noah. It was a different kind of day. Tonight was about Cole testing what was here. About tomorrow is about what comes next. "What does come next?" Noah asked. There was quiet for a moment. Gareth Cole wakes up tomorrow morning and discovers that 12 of his men are being held until the county sheriff, who is not unaware of what has been happening in this county, has a working relationship with this chapter that goes back a long time, figures out what to do with them. He discovers that his operation on this end of the Eastern Corridor has been mapped, compromised, and is now known in detail to people who know how to use that information. That the one individual he sent to make a quiet problem quietly disappear is now the subject of a very specific investigation. He paused. Gareth Cole is smart. Smart people understand when the math is changed. You think he pulls back. I think he makes a calculation tomorrow morning, and the calculation tells him that Red Hollow is too expensive. Ryder looked at him steadily. Geography hasn't changed. The route is still valuable. Instead of taking it, just became something different entirely than what he planned for. "Because of Tuesday night," Noah said. "Because of Tuesday night," Ryder agreed. "Because you stopped on that road. Because Claire is alive. Because alive means I'm not grieving. It means I'm not distracted, which means I am completely focused on making this cost as much as it needs to cost." He looked at Noah with something in his expression that was layered and genuine. "You didn't just save her life. You changed what was possible in every conversation that came after." Noah stood with that for a moment. "Home," Ryder said quietly. He went home. He drove the Henderson truck back to the shop, left the key on the hook, walked to his own truck, drove to Elm Street. He pulled into his driveway and sat there for a while, the way he had on Tuesday night, in the same seat, with the same engine ticking down around him, like Tuesday had been a different year. He went inside. He drank a glass of water standing at the kitchen sink, about calling his grandmother, and decided it was too late, that she would be in bed, and that what he needed to tell her deserved daylight. He buzzed. He almost didn't look. The text was from a number he didn't recognize. I recognized the brevity of it, the way it had been typed by someone who was being economical with words, not out of coldness, but out of the understanding that some things don't need elaboration. It said, "She knows you came tonight. Thank you." See, he stood in his kitchen holding his phone and reading those 8 words in the single initial, and he felt something move through him that was too complicated to name precisely, but that had at its center something warm and steady and very simple. He texted back, "Take care of yourself." Then he put his phone on the counter and went to bed, without dreaming, which was what his body needed. And in the morning, he woke to his alarm at 6:30 and lay in bed for a moment, listening to Red Hollow waking up around him. 2 houses over, the garbage truck, the creak of the house in the cold, some sounds the same morning. And yet, he got up. He made coffee. He sat at the kitchen table and he called his grandmother. She picked up, on the second ring, which meant she had been awake already, which meant some part of her had been waiting, the way she always waited when she knew something was moving in his life that he hadn't told her about yet. "Oops, Noah," she said. "Good morning, Grandma. You're calling early." "I know." He held the coffee cup in both hands. "I have some things to tell you, and I wanted to tell you before you heard from anyone else." A pause. In front of her settling into a chair, he could picture it exactly, the wingback by the window that had been there since before he was born. "Right," she said. "I'm listening," he told her. Everything, not every operational detail, not every name, the full architecture of what had happened on the streets of Red Hollow while she had been at home on Chestnut, not knowing. But the essential things, the woman in the forest, the decision he'd made, the days that had followed, that people had been watching her house without her knowing, that last night had happened, and that it was, as far as anyone could currently tell, resolved. She listened without interrupting. It was her way. She listened completely. And then she responded, rather than weaving her responses through the listening the way some people did. Well, when he finished, there was a silence. Then she said, "Carried her out of those woods." "Yes, ma'am." "Alone." "Dark." "Yes, ma'am." Another pause. "And you've been handling all of this," she said, "quietly, since Tuesday. By yourself, not by myself." "Oh, Uncle Dale." "Dale," she said, with the specific affection and mild exasperation of a woman who had known her brother-in-law for 40 years and loved him completely and was also very aware of his limitations. "He was a good man, and I'm going to have some words with him about not telling me." A breath. "There? You, Noah, you've been carrying this." "I'm okay," he said. "Well, I'm really okay. I know you are." Her voice shifted. It went to the register. It went to sometimes that he had no name for, except that it was the voice she used when she was saying something she had felt for a long time and had been saving for the right moment. "I prayed for every day since you were small. I've prayed that you would be the kind of person who didn't walk past, that you'd be the kind of person who stopped." A pause, more specific maybe about the circumstances. Despite everything, despite the fatigue and the weight of 4 days of sustained intensity, Noah laughed. It surprised him, the laugh. It was genuine and sudden, and it felt like something releasing a valve, like the specific physical relief of a long-held breath finally let go. "This weekend," his grandmother said. "You promised." "I'll be there Saturday morning," he said. "Yes, I'll make breakfast." "That sounds, yeah. Sure, that sounds really good." He hung up and sat at the kitchen table with his coffee going cold and the morning light coming through the window and thought about what Ryder had said. It was a different kind of day. It was. But it was also, underneath all of that, a Thursday, a work day. The Henderson truck was done. Pruitt's truck was done. There was a 2006 Dodge Ram belonging to a man named Gary Fuller, coming in at 9 o'clock for a transmission check. Sure. And the work would be there, and his hands would know what to do with it. He finished his coffee, he got his jacket, he drove to the shop. Dale was already there. Dale looked at him when he came through the door and assessed him the way Dale always assessed him, thoroughly and without commentary. And then Dale said, "Their Fuller's Ram is already in the lot. He came early." "I'll get to it," Noah said. Also, Dale paused, something in his expression. "What?" "There's a woman out back. She says you know her." "What?" "She says her name is Jessie." Noah was still for a moment. "Drove through the night," Dale said. "She looks like it." She asked if she could wait. He looked at Noah. "I gave her coffee," Noah said. Rickers. He went through to the back. Jessie was sitting at the folding table in the break room with both hands around a coffee cup, the way he had held his own cup this morning for the warmth of it as much as anything. When he came in, and she had the look of someone who had driven a long distance in the dark, carrying something heavy, and had arrived and wasn't entirely sure what arriving meant yet. "Love," Noah said. "I'm safe." She looked at him. "I heard what happened last night. Not details. I'm not connected to anyone who has details." "Enough." She set her cup down. "I wanted to..." She stopped. "But again, I needed to know that what I told you actually helped." Just stop." "It helped," Noah said. Down across from her. "It mattered. You made a choice that cost you something, and it changed what happened last night." She looked at him for a moment. Eyes were tired, and something in them was working through something that was not simple. What do I do now? She asked. Gareth is going to know eventually that the leak came from someone close enough to know what Wilborn was planning. She stopped. You can't go back, Noah said. Know that, Ryder said. He thought about how to put it. He said that whatever you were asked to be part of, whatever you did or didn't do, that's not his fight with you, that you're safe from his side. He looked at her steadily. Oh, and from Cole's side, last night, changed what Cole is going to be dealing with for a while. He's not going to have bandwidth to come after loose ends, with 12 men in county custody and a federal interest that I'm told is now involved. He paused. I don't know all the details of that part, but you have time. Time to do what? She asked. Time to figure out what comes next, Noah said, which is more than you had on Tuesday. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked at the coffee cup. Then she said very quietly, I don't know how you do this. Do what? This. Be this. She gestured at him, not vaguely, specifically, the particular quality of how he was sitting across from her in a break room at 7 in the morning with grease probably still under his nails from yesterday. You keep being the same person. No matter what's happening around you, you just keep being the same. Noah thought about that, about his grandmother's voice saying same thing in different words, about Dale saying his father was like that, about a woman in a dark forest saying, you're really just a mechanic, about how none of those things had felt like a description of something special. They had felt like descriptions of the only thing he knew how to do. I don't know how to be anything else, he said. She nodded slowly. He said, at least for today. Use the phone. Figure out where you go from here. You don't have to leave this morning. She looked at him. I won't mind, he said. He already gave you coffee. Something shifted in her face. A smile exactly. But the thing that happens before a smile, when the muscles around the mouth make a small involuntary movement that means something is being felt. She said, just today. He nodded. He stood up. He had a transmission to check. He went to work. Gary Fuller's transmission was fine. That was the verdict after an hour and a half of careful checking, not a catastrophic failure, not even a serious problem, just a slight hesitation on second to third gear shift that turned out to be a fluid issue and a filter that was 2 years overdue for a change. I told Gary it would be ready by end of day, and Gary nodded and shook his hand and left, and Noah stood in the bay for a moment with his hands on the edge of the truck and just breathed. Ordinary was extraordinary today. The specific, ordinary weight of a Tuesday is fine transmission on a Thursday morning after the week he had just lived felt like something he wanted to hold still and appreciate. One with a clear cause, a solution that existed and was within his ability to apply, outcome that could be measured and verified. He changed the fluid. He replaced the filter. He worked. From the break room, he could hear occasional low voices, Jessie on her phone, calls, figuring out what came next. Dale had being asked, and without making any comment about it, her a second cup of coffee and a sandwich from the deli. That was Dale's language, and it was fluent and generous, and Noah loved him for it. At 10:15, his phone rang. Ryder, not the contact number. Ryder's direct line, which had shown up in Noah's phone as a contact sometime in the last 4 days without him consciously registering when. You're at the shop, Ryder said, working on a transmission. A brief pause that had something in it that might have been satisfaction. I'll tell you a few things. You got a minute? Yeah, Gareth Cole called me this morning. He let that land at 8:47 on a number he shouldn't have, which tells you something about how much intelligence he has on our operation. A separate problem. He called because he wanted to talk. Noah set down the wrench he was holding. What did he say? He said last night was a misunderstanding. Ryder's voice was completely flat. Not angry, the anger had been processed somewhere earlier, privately, in the way Ryder processed everything he didn't display. He said that Wilborn acted beyond his authorization. He said he had no intention of escalating things in Red Hollow, and that he was willing to find a different approach to his business interests in the county. You believe him? Noah asked. No. Immediate. But I believe that he's recalculating. By to believe that he sent 15 men last night based on one set of assumptions about what he'd find here. What he found was not those assumptions. I believe that 12 of his people being in county custody is creating a set of pressures on his operation that he did not plan for. A pause. I believe that a federal interest being involved, which became official this morning, is the specific variable that changed Gareth Cole's tone between yesterday and today. Federal, Noah said. Trace Wilborn has a history that goes beyond state lines. When Wilborn showed up in Red Hollow last night, he became a federal problem. Federal problems have a way of making people like Gareth Cole decide that a particular piece of geography is not worth the cost. Ryder paused again. Willow is off his map. That's not a prediction. It's a statement of current fact. Tell me so in different words, and I'm telling you in plain ones. Noah leaned against the truck. He let that settle into him the way good news settles slowly, but with the particular care of someone who has been careful about believing things all week. Born, he asked. Running, Ryder said, which is its own answer. Who runs instead of standing tells you everything about whether he believed in what he was doing or whether he was just doing a job. He paused. He'll be found. Not by us, by the people who have that jurisdiction. Their work now, and we let them do it. Okay, Noah said. Okay. There's one more thing. Ryder's voice changed, slightly moved to a register that Noah had heard once before. Thursday morning in the shop, when Ryder had apologized for moving Noah without asking him. The register of a man being deliberately direct about something personal. I'm to bring Claire to see you. When she's ready to move, which Doc Warren says will be another week at least. She has something she wants to say to you in person, and she asked me to ask you if that was all right. Noah thought about 8 words on a text message late at night. Look, she knows you came tonight. Thank you. Yeah, he said. Right. Good. A pause. How's the transmission? It was such a specific gear shift from federal investigations and Gareth Cole and Trace Wilborn to house the transmission that Noah almost laughed. So a filter issue should have been done 2 years ago. People put things off, Ryder said. There was something almost philosophical in the way he said it. Wait until it's a crisis. Yeah, Noah said. Ended. He picked up his wrench, finished the transmission. The week moved forward the way weeks do, after something seismic, not with a dramatic return to normal, but with a gradual reassertion of the normal around the edges, ordinary filling back in from the periphery toward the center. That by Friday evening, the shop felt mostly like the shop again, and Red Hollow felt mostly like Red Hollow, with the mostly doing a lot of work that the entirely wasn't ready to do yet. Jessie stayed 2 days. She slept on the couch in Dale's office the first night. Dale had suggested it, and she had accepted with the careful dignity of someone who was grateful but not comfortable being grateful, who was still working out how to receive things from people who didn't want anything back. On the second day, she made calls. She had a cousin in Nashville who could take her in for a while. She had, it turned out, a practical mind underneath everything else. She had been keeping records. Official records, not anything she'd originally intended to use for anything. Notes, dates, things she'd witnessed. The kind of records that people in her situation sometimes kept instinctively as a form of insurance they hoped they'd never need. Noah didn't tell her what to do with those records. He mentioned once that the federal interest Ryder had told him about might be relevant. I meant it there, and she looked at him with the specific look of someone receiving information and filing it carefully at once. On Friday afternoon, she hugged Dale, which surprised him enough that he stood very still for a second before his arms came up, and he patted her back once with the gruff tenderness of a man who hadn't been hugged unexpectedly in a while. Then she turned to Noah. I don't know what I'm supposed to say, she said. You don't have to say anything, Noah said. I know. She looked at him. But that's the thing. You never make people feel like they have to say anything. She paused. That's a gift. You don't know how rare that is. She drove to Nashville, watched her taillights until they turned the corner, and then he went back inside and picked up a wrench because there was still an hour of daylight and a carburetor that needed cleaning. Saturday morning, he drove to his grandmother's. The drive was 40 minutes on a back road. He had taken so many times in his life that his hands could have made the turns without his eyes, and he made them now in the early November light, with the heater running and the radio low, and the week sitting in him like something that had been consumed and was still being digested, present, significant, changing him at some cellular level that he couldn't yet fully perceive. The porch, when he pulled up, she had her coat on and her arms crossed against the cold, duct tape on the corners. And she had been watching the road for his truck the way she had been watching that road since he was a child coming home from school, or since he was a teenager coming home from wherever teenagers go when they are learning who they are, since he was 20, and this was still the place that was most fully home. Out of the truck, she didn't say anything. She opened her arms and he walked into them, and she held him the way she had always held him, completely. A reservation, with the specific strength of a small woman who had decided a long time ago that the people she loved would always know they were held. Let himself be held for a moment. Just that. Just the fact of it. She stepped back and looked at his face with the thorough attention of someone who had been reading his face for 20 years and knew every variation of it. Okay, she said. Not a question, a verification. Okay, he said. Good. She turned toward the door. Inside, I made biscuits, and I made that gravy you like, and I made scrambled eggs with the cheese, and I want you to eat all of it. He followed her inside. He ate all of it. They talked for 3 hours. She asked questions, he answered, and she listened the way she had always listened, completely, their whole attention, the coffee cooling in her cup because she forgot to drink it when she was really listening. She asked about Claire and about Ryder and about Jesse. She asked about Dale. She asked quietly, or actually frightened. He thought about it honestly. Phone call in the kitchen, he said. That was the worst moment. Because of what he said, because of the feeling that someone had been watching me and I hadn't known it. She nodded. A violation, she said. That feeling. It makes you feel like the ground shifted. Yeah. He looked at his coffee cup. It passed. Things like that always pass, she said. Sound always comes back. She looked at him. Because of what you are, who you are, that doesn't shift. Noah, that's what I want you to understand. Whatever happened this week, you went into it as yourself and you came out of it as yourself. Some people don't manage that. He looked at her across the kitchen table. Light was the specific quality of November light in Tennessee, clear and thin and honest, kind that didn't soften anything, but made if everything very distinctly itself. She was 71 years old, and she had raised him from the age of 6, and she had given him every important thing he carried. I keep thinking about, he said. Tell me. I keep thinking about those 11 seconds. Sitting in the truck on Route 9 before I got out. He looked at her. Almost didn't. I sat there for 11 seconds, and I almost convinced myself to drive away. She looked at him steadily. No, why not? He thought about it many times in the last week, and he had arrived at the same answer every time, only answer that was fully true. Because of what you told me every day when I was growing up. He met her eyes. A good person never walks away from someone who needs help. She was quiet for a moment. Eyes did something that they didn't do very often. They went bright. From sadness, from the specific overwhelming feeling of something you planted a long time ago, coming back to you, full grown and real. Mother used to say something similar, she said. Very quietly, she used to say, the only thing you owe a stranger is your best moment. Whatever your best is your kindest, your bravest, or your most present, that's what you owe a stranger who needs it. Noah sat with that. I think about her, he said. When things get hard, I don't have a lot of memories. I was too young, but I have a feeling. None of her. He paused. I don't know how to explain it better than that. You don't have to explain it, his grandmother said. I know exactly what you mean. They sat together in the kitchen for a while after that. Without talking, it was the comfortable, inhabited silence of people who had been in the same silences many times and knew how to exist in them without filling them. He drove back to Red Hollow in the early afternoon. It looked the same. It always looked the same. And today, that sameness was something he felt actively grateful for the hardware store. The church, the intersection of Maple and Route 9, where a week ago 30 motorcycles had made a place that every person in Red Hollow had felt without fully understanding. It had heard through Dale that people had been talking. First, they had been talking. Red Hollow was a town of 4,000 people, and something had happened here this week that was visible and audible and impossible to ignore. Motorcycles on Wednesday morning, the activity on Thursday night on Doc Warren Street, many sheriff's vehicles on Route 9. People had seen things, and people had talked about what they'd seen, and the story that was being assembled through those conversations was not entirely accurate and was more dramatic than the reality in some places and less dramatic than the reality in others, which was how community stories always worked. What he had not expected was what Dale told him when he got back to the shop on Saturday afternoon. "Well, you've had 6 calls today," Dale said. He was holding a piece of paper with names and numbers on it, wanting work done. 3 of them specifically asked for you. Noah looked at the list. He recognized 2 of the names people he had seen around town his whole life. One he didn't recognize at all. "Why?" he asked, though he already partly understood. "Because people talk," Dale said simply. And what got talked about, apparently, was not the motorcycles or the county sheriff or any of the things that happened on Route 9. What talked about was a 20-year-old mechanic who stopped his truck in the dark curved forest on a Tuesday night. He looked at Noah over the piece of paper. "That's the story that's going around Red Hollow, not the other parts." Noah stood with that. "Mrs. Kowalski from the flower shop across the street came over this morning," Dale continued. "A pie. She wouldn't tell me why. She just said she wanted to. And then Jim Brewer from the barber shop came by and asked if we needed anything. And then Pastor Mitchell called and left a message for you." He paused. "I don't know exactly what he's calling about, but I'd guess it has something to do with Sunday service." "I'm not going to be anyone's sermon illustration," Noah said, almost smiled. "I don't think you get to decide that part." He was right. Lower. Noah sat in the 3rd pew of First Baptist Red Hollow, next to his grandmother he had driven back out Saturday night to bring her to church since Christmas, which he hadn't done since a sermon about the Good Samaritan that did not mention Noah by name, but that everyone in the building understood was about him, and which made him intensely uncomfortable in a way that he didn't have the heart to complain about because his grandmother's hand was on his arm the whole time, and she was the happiest he had seen her in months. In the parking lot, people came to talk to him, dramatically, not in a crowd, not with speeches. At a time, in the quiet way that people in small towns have of saying important things, on the shoulder a few words, a look that communicated something larger than what was said. Old men who had known his father, women who had known his grandmother for decades, young people his own age who had heard something and wanted to acknowledge it. He shook hands. He said thank you. He meant it. And then, following Wednesday, exactly 2 weeks after he had stopped his truck on Route 9, he was in the back bay of the shop when he heard the motorcycle pull into the lot. He came out of the bay, wiping his hands, and found Claire Dawson sitting on a bike that she should not have been riding yet. Doc Warren's timeline, in which she had clearly ridden anyway, because she was the kind of person who arrived at her own timeline and applied it regardless of what anyone else had planned. Her arm was in a partial brace. She was upright and fully present, and she looked at him across the lot with the dark eyes he had first seen in a flashlight beam in a dark forest. Toward her. She swung off the bike slowly, carefully, cushioned to the shoulder, and stood facing him. "Warren is furious with me," she said. "I imagine so," Noah said. "Claire is also furious with me, and yet here you are. And yet here I am." She looked at him with an expression that was doing several things at once, assessing, carrying something that had weight and that she had carried all the way from Doc Warren's house on the back of a motorcycle she shouldn't have been riding. "I needed to come in person. I'm not a phone call kind of person." "I know," he said. He didn't know how he knew, but he did. She looked at him for a moment. "I'm going to say something, and I need you to let me say it without interrupting." "Okay." "I have been in this world for 15 years, she said. "There's world, the chapter, everything that comes with it. In 15 years, I have seen a lot of things. I have seen courage, and I have seen people perform courage because they thought someone was watching. I have seen people do the right thing because it was profitable and do the wrong thing because they were afraid, and everything in between. She held his eyes. Hello. I have never, in 15 years, seen someone stop on a road at night for a stranger in a vest they recognized, and an injury they knew was dangerous, and a situation any sensible person would have driven away from, with no audience and no agenda, and no idea whether they'd survive the next 20 minutes. She paused. You did that night the way you did it. I have been trying to find a word for it for 2 weeks, and the only word I keep coming back to is, it was a clean thing, uncomplicated. You did it because it was right, and for no other reason. She paused again. That's rarer than people know. Noah stood on the lot and received that. He didn't deflect it. He didn't minimize it. He let it land where it was aimed. Thank you, he said. She nodded. Then she said, Ryder wants to do something for you. And trying to figure out what. Because you won't take money, he already knows that. Don't ask me how, he just knows. And you don't want anything that draws attention. A pause. To Summers, he asked me what I thought you needed. What did you tell him? She almost smiled. Muscles at the corners of her mouth moved in that way that was almost something. I told him you needed a better truck. Noah looked at his truck, parked on the side of the lot. The 2001 Silverado with the cracked dashboard and the driver's door that you had to lift slightly to get it fully closed, and the heater that worked 80% of the time. Gotten him everywhere he needed to go for 3 years, and he was genuinely fond of it. Don't need, he started. It's not about need, Claire said. It's about Ryder keeping his word. He told you, the Hells Angels never forget someone who protects their family. Specifically, and he intends to honor it specifically. She looked at him steadily. You earned it, and it's going to happen whether you argue or not, so you might as well accept it with whatever grace you can manage. He looked at her for a moment. She looked back. She was not going to budge, which was entirely evident from every line of her body. That arguing with this woman was an exercise that no one had ever won, and no one was going to win today. Right, he said. Good. She looked toward the shop. Uncle inside? Yes. I'm going to go introduce myself, she said. Really, since the first time we met, he was watching through a window, and she stopped. And there was real stop. Something moving across her face that was not the controlled stillness she usually wore. I was not at my best. He knows that, Noah said. But still, she moved toward the shop door, then paused. She didn't turn around. Noah. Yeah. You asked me something in those woods. Lost my name so you could talk to me while you got me out of there. She paused. How'd you do it that way? You could have just carried me out. About it. You didn't need my name. He thought about it. He remembered the moment kneeling in the dark beside the fallen oak, saying, I need you to tell me your name so I can talk to you while I figure out how to get you out of here. Not about why at the time. He had just done it. Because you weren't a problem, he said finally. You were a person. And people need to be talked to like they're people, like there's something that needs fixing. She stood still for a moment. Then she went inside to introduce herself to Dale. Noah stood in the lot alone for a while. The November air was the same cold it had been 2 weeks ago. The same mountains in the same distance. The same town around him that had always been around him. Ordinary and real and his. He thought about everything that had changed. About everything that hadn't. He thought about 11 seconds on the shoulder of Route 9, flashlight in the glove box, the voice in the dark that turned out to be Claire, the weight of her in his arms as he moved through those trees. About Ryder's extended hand. About the phone call in the kitchen and Jesse at the folding table. Oxhorn Street at 7:43 in the evening, and headlights cutting across a porch at exactly the right moment. His grandmother's arms and his uncle's face, and a town that had started to understand what had happened in it and had responded with pie and handshakes, and a parking lot full of quiet words. He hadn't asked for any of it. He had stopped on a road. He had carried someone through a forest. He had told the truth and shaken hands and gone to work every morning and answered his phone and picked up his wrench and been as consistently as he knew how, the person his grandmother had raised him to be. And that, it turned out, was enough to change everything. Not because he was special, not because he had powers or resources or a reputation or anything that the world would typically have pointed to and said, that is the person who makes a difference. He had none of those things. He was a 20-year-old mechanic in a small Tennessee mountain town with grease under his nails and a cracked dashboard and a grandmother who made biscuits and a deep, unshakable conviction that a good person never walks away from someone who needs help. All he had, it was everything. He heard the shop door open and Dale's voice saying something that made Claire respond with a short I sound that Noah was starting to recognize as her version of a laugh. And from somewhere in the chest of him, beneath the tiredness and the weight of 2 weeks that had changed him in ways he was still discovering, warm and steady, moved. He turned and walked back into the shop. He had work to do. And in Red Hollow, Tennessee, Wednesday morning in November, that was exactly enough.